When billionaire CEO Camilla Reyes's vintage Harley died in the rain outside a rundown Portland garage, she had two choices: call her assistant and return to the empire that was suffocating her, or walk through that door and meet the man who would shatter every wall she'd built around her heart. She chose the door. What she found inside wasn't just a mechanic with grease-stained hands and a 6-year-old daughter who still believed in fairy tales. It was everything her penthouse kingdom could never give her. But secrets have a way of destroying the things we love most, and Camilla's secret was big enough to break them all. If you're watching from your city tonight, drop a comment below and hit that like button. I want to see how far this story travels across the world. The rain came down like it meant business. Not the gentle mist that Portland wore like a second skin, but the kind of downpour that turned streets into rivers and made even the bravest souls reconsider their life choices. It hammered against the corrugated metal roof of Brooks Auto Repair with a rhythm that had become Ethan's evening lullaby. Steady, relentless, oddly comforting in its predictability. Ethan Brooks stood in the center of his shop, wiping his hands on a red rag that had seen better days, probably around the same time his marriage had. The rag was more grease than fabric now, just like his life was more routine than living. But routine kept him upright. Routine kept Maddie fed and safe. Routine meant he didn't have to think too hard about the empty side of the bed or the way his chest still seized up sometimes when he caught a whiff of jasmine perfume in a grocery store aisle. "Dad, can I have the last cookie?" Maddie's voice echoed from the small office at the back of the shop, where she'd set up her homework station on a desk that tilted slightly to the left. "You already had 3, kiddo," Ethan called back, a smile tugging at his mouth despite the exhaustion that lived in his bones. "But you said I could have the last one if I finished my math. I said you could have a cookie if you finished your math. There's a difference." A dramatic sigh rolled out of the office, the kind only a 6-year-old could manufacture with such theatrical perfection. "You're mean." "Yep, meanest dad in Portland. Tell your friends." Ethan glanced at the clock mounted above his workbench, 7:47 p.m. Past closing time by nearly an hour, but he'd been elbow deep in Mrs. Chen's transmission rebuild and lost track. Happened more often than he'd like to admit. The work gave him something to focus on besides the silence that waited at home, in the small 2-bedroom house 3 blocks away, where everything still smelled faintly like Sarah's lavender lotion, even though she'd been gone for 2 years. 2 years, 3 months, and 16 days. Not that he was counting. He was about to start closing up, rolling down the bay doors, killing the lights, pretending he wasn't dreading another evening of frozen pizza and whatever cartoon Maddie had decided was her new obsession, when he heard it. The growl of a motorcycle engine, deep and throaty and unmistakably vintage, cutting through the rain's percussion, then sputtering, coughing, dying. Ethan paused, rag in hand, listening. The rain filled the silence where the engine had been. Then nothing but water hitting metal, hitting pavement, hitting everything. He walked to the half-open bay door and looked out into the wet darkness. A woman stood beside a motorcycle in the middle of the street, rain plastering her dark hair to her skull, leather jacket soaked through, boots in a puddle that reflected the streetlight's amber glow. She wasn't moving, wasn't pulling out a phone, wasn't cursing or kicking the tire, or doing any of the things people usually did when their ride died at the worst possible moment. She just stood there, hands loose at her sides, face tilted up toward the sky like she was having a conversation with the storm. Something about that stillness made Ethan's chest tighten. He knew that look, that particular flavor of defeated. He'd worn it himself back when the hospital bills piled up and the life insurance barely covered the funeral, and suddenly he was a single father with a mortgage and a daughter who kept asking when mommy was coming home from heaven. "Dad?" Maddie appeared at his elbow, standing on tiptoes to see what he was looking at. "Is that lady okay?" "Don't know yet, baby. She looks sad." Kids saw things adults had learned to ignore or explain away. Maddie saw sad the way other people saw colors. Immediate, undeniable, requiring response. Ethan grabbed his rain jacket from the hook by the door, the heavy canvas one with his name stitched over the pocket. "Stay inside, okay? I'm just going to see if she needs help." "Can I watch?" "From the door. Don't come out in the rain." "You're going out in the rain. I'm a grown-up. Different rules." "That's not fair. Life rarely is, kiddo." He stepped out into the downpour, and the cold hit him like a slap. April in Portland meant rain, but it also meant that weird temperature where you couldn't decide if you were freezing or just uncomfortable. Ethan jogged across the street, water splashing up from potholes that the city kept promising to fix. The woman didn't turn as he approached, didn't acknowledge his presence until he was close enough to have to raise his voice over the rain. "Hey, you okay?" She finally looked at him, and Ethan felt something shift in his chest. Her eyes were dark, almost black in the dim light, and they held the kind of exhaustion that came from running too long without knowing why you were running or where you were running to. "My bike died," she said simply. Her voice was smooth, controlled, like she was used to delivering bad news without flinching. "I gathered that." Ethan glanced at the motorcycle, a vintage Harley, maybe a 75 or 76 Ironhead Sportster, beautiful lines even soaked and dead. "Want me to take a look?" "You're a mechanic?" She said it without surprise, just stating a fact. "Shop's right there." He jerked his thumb toward Brooks Auto Repair, where Maddie's small face was pressed against the window, fogging up the glass. The woman followed his gesture, took in the modest garage with its hand-painted sign and flickering fluorescent lights. Something flickered across her face, not quite relief, more like resignation, or maybe acceptance. "How much?" she asked. "Won't know until I look at it. Could be simple, could be complicated." Ethan wiped rain from his face. "Either way, we should probably have this conversation somewhere that isn't the middle of a monsoon." She almost smiled. Almost. "Practical. Midwestern roots. Can't shake 'em." This time she did smile, just barely, just enough to crack the mask of composure. "I'm Camilla." "Ethan." He held out his hand, realized it was wet and greasy, started to pull it back. Camilla took it anyway, her grip firm and warm despite the rain. Her hands were soft but not delicate, working hands, just working at something different than his. "Let's get your bike inside before it drowns," Ethan said. Together they pushed the Harley across the street and into the garage. It rolled smooth, no grinding or catching, which was a good sign. Maddie backed up as they maneuvered it into the empty bay, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Whoa," she breathed. "That's so cool. Maddie, this is Camilla." "Camilla, my daughter Maddie." "Hi." Maddie waved with the enthusiasm of someone who hadn't yet learned that strangers were supposed to be treated with suspicion. "Hi, Maddie." Camilla's voice softened, lost some of that controlled edge. "Nice to meet you." "Do you like motorcycles?" "I do." "Do you like cookies?" "Maddie," Ethan warned. "What?" "I'm just asking." Maddie turned back to Camilla with the kind of earnest intensity that made adults uncomfortable. "We have cookies in the office. Well, one cookie. Dad won't let me have it, but maybe if we have a guest." "Nice try, kiddo." Ethan grabbed his work light and crouched beside the Harley, already scanning for obvious issues. "Why don't you go finish your homework?" "I already did." "Then read a book." "I read 3 books today." "Read a 4th. Maddie rolled her eyes with the weight of someone who'd been deeply wronged by the universe. "Fine, but if you eat that cookie without me, I'm telling Grandma you're mean." "Noted." Ethan was already lost in the mechanical puzzle in front of him, fingers tracing the fuel lines, checking the carburetor, testing the spark plugs. This was his language, the one he spoke better than English sometimes, the grammar of engines, the syntax of metal and motion. Camilla stood a few feet back, watching him work with an expression he couldn't quite read. Not impatient, exactly. More like curious. Like she was studying him the way he was studying her bike. "How long have you had her?" Ethan asked, not looking up. "The bike? About 3 months." "Bought her vintage or restored?" "Restored. Previous owner did the work. I just acquired her." Something about the way she said acquired made Ethan glance up. Rich, he thought. That was the word choice of someone who bought things without checking price tags first. But her leather jacket was worn in a way that money couldn't fake, and there was road dust on her boots that spoke of miles, not showrooms. "She's beautiful," he said honestly. "Ironhead Sportster, right? 76? 7 him, good eye." "I know bikes." Ethan went back to his examination, found the problem almost immediately. Your fuel filter's clogged. Probably picked up some debris in the tank. When's the last time you had her serviced? Camilla was quiet for a beat too long. I don't remember. You've been riding her for 3 months and haven't... Ethan stopped himself, heard the judgment in his own voice, dialed it back. Never mind. Not my business. I can swap the filter, flush the line, have you back on the road in maybe 45 minutes. How much? $75, parts and labor. Camilla pulled out a wallet from her inside jacket pocket, produced a credit card that caught the light with a metallic gleam. Do you take cards? I do, but... Ethan frowned. You sure you don't want to wait and see if there's anything else wrong? Sometimes one problem hides another. I trust your assessment. You don't know me. You stopped to help a stranger in the rain. That tells me enough. Ethan didn't know what to do with that, so he just nodded and got to work. He was acutely aware of Camilla's presence as he moved around the bike. The way she stood perfectly still, the way her breathing was so controlled it was almost unnatural, like she'd trained herself to take up as little space as possible despite being tall enough to look him nearly in the eye. You can sit if you want, he offered, gesturing to the folding chair in the corner. No reason to stand the whole time. I don't mind standing. Suit yourself. He worked in silence for a while, the familiar rhythm of diagnosis and repair settling his mind. This he understood. This he could fix. Unlike grief, unlike single parenthood, unlike the crushing weight of loneliness that sat on his chest every night when Maddie was asleep, and the house was quiet, and there was no one to tell him he was doing okay, that he was enough, that he wasn't failing at this impossible job of being both parents at once. You're fast, Camilla observed after about 20 minutes. Been doing this since I was 15. Picked it up from my dad. Ethan swapped out the fuel filter with practiced efficiency. He had a shop in Kansas, taught me everything, changing oil, rebuilding engines, how to tell when someone's lying about what they did to their car before it broke. Did a lot of people lie? Constantly. I don't know how it happened. I was just driving normal usually means I did something really stupid and don't want to admit it. He grinned despite himself. My dad could smell bullshit from a mile away. Useful skill. In this business, essential. Ethan flushed the fuel line, checked the flow. Clean, good. In life? Sometimes. Sometimes it's easier not to know when people are lying. Lets you sleep better. He didn't know why he said that. Didn't know this woman at all. Had no reason to get philosophical with a stranger who'd probably be gone the second her bike was running. But something about her made him feel like he could say true things without being judged for them. I'm sorry, Camilla said quietly. Ethan looked up. For what? Whatever happened that taught you that. Their eyes met across the garage, and for a second, just a flash, Ethan saw past the control, past the careful composure, and glimpsed something raw and wounded and achingly familiar. She was lonely, not alone. There was a difference, and Ethan knew it intimately. You could be surrounded by people and still feel like you were standing on an island watching the world from a distance. You could have everything, success, security, comfort, and still wake up feeling hollow. He'd been living in that hollow place for 2 years now, and he recognized the neighborhood. Yeah, he said softly. Me too. The moment stretched, delicate as spun glass, and then Maddie's voice shattered it. Dad, can Camilla stay for dinner? Ethan nearly dropped his wrench. Maddie, we're having spaghetti! Maddie appeared in the office doorway, bouncing on her toes with excitement. And there's garlic bread. And you said we always have enough to share if someone needs food. I said that about homeless people at the shelter, baby, not random customers. But you also said we should be nice to everyone, and Camilla is everyone. That's how everyone works. Camilla's laugh surprised both of them, bright and genuine and completely unguarded. She makes a compelling argument. She makes a 6-year-old argument, Ethan muttered, but he was fighting a smile. You don't have to... I'd like to, Camilla interrupted, if it's not too much trouble. It's no trouble. Maddie was already racing back into the office, probably to make sure the cookie situation was handled. Dad makes really good spaghetti. Well, it's from a jar, but he adds stuff to make it fancy. Ethan felt heat creep up his neck. It's not fancy. It's barely competent. I haven't had barely competent spaghetti in a long time, Camilla said, and there was something in her voice, something tired and true, that made Ethan stop objecting. All right, he said. Give me 10 more minutes to finish this up, and we'll head to the house. It's just a couple blocks away. I can wait. She did wait, standing there in her damp leather jacket, watching him work with that same quiet intensity. Ethan finished the repair, fired up the Harley to test it. The engine caught immediately, purring like a satisfied cat, and then killed it again. Good as new, he announced. Actually, better than new. You should get her serviced every 3,000 miles, not when she dies on you in the rain. Noted. Camilla pulled out her wallet again. 75, you said? Yeah. Ethan grabbed his card reader, the old square one that clipped onto his phone. And do me a favor, check your oil level when you get wherever you're going. If you've been neglecting maintenance, there might be other issues brewing. Camilla swiped her card. The reader beeped. Transaction approved. Then she pulled out 520s and held them out. Ethan stared at the cash. I already charged you. I know. Then why, because you stayed late. Because you helped a stranger. Because, she paused, seemed to search for words. Because you look at people when you talk to them, and that's rarer than you'd think. Ethan didn't take the money. I charged you a fair price. I'm offering more. Why? The question hung between them, simple and loaded. Camilla's hand wavered, the bills trembling slightly. Her composure cracked just a little, and in that crack Ethan saw something desperate, a need to give, to matter, to be more than whatever role she'd been playing before she walked through his door. Why do you want to pay more? He asked again, gentler this time. Camilla lowered her hand slowly. I don't know, she admitted. I wanted to. Keep it. Ethan turned away, started cleaning up his workspace. You'll need it for gas money, Portland to wherever you're heading. I'm not heading anywhere specific. Even better, nothing burns through cash like wandering. He felt her watching him, felt the weight of something unspoken pressing against the air between them. But then Maddie burst out of the office with her backpack and her jacket and her endless enthusiasm, and the moment dissolved. Ready, she announced. I packed my homework and my book and the cookie because someone should enjoy it. Maddie Grace Brooks, I swear. What? I'm being resourceful. You said resourceful is good. Ethan looked at Camilla helplessly. I'm sorry in advance for everything that's about to happen. Camilla smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. Don't be. They locked up the shop, Ethan double-checking the bay doors while Maddie chattered at Camilla about her favorite books and her least favorite vegetables, and why dinosaurs were definitely cooler than dragons, even though dragons could fly. Camilla listened with the kind of attention most adults didn't give kids, actually listening, not just waiting for them to stop talking. The rain had eased to a drizzle, soft enough that they didn't bother running. They walked through the wet streets of northeast Portland, past corner stores with glowing signs and houses with warm windows, and Ethan felt something strange unfold in his chest. Peace. Not happiness, not yet. Just the absence of the constant low-grade anxiety that had been his companion for 2 years. The simple, unexpected comfort of walking home with his daughter and another person who wasn't judging him, wasn't expecting anything, wasn't trying to fix him or pity him or set him up with their divorced cousin who really needs to meet a nice guy. Just walking, just existing, just being enough exactly as he was. The house was small, a bungalow with peeling paint that Ethan kept meaning to fix and never quite got around to. Inside it was cluttered in the way homes with kids always were. Shoes by the door, drawings on the fridge, toys that migrated from room to room like they had lives of their own. Welcome to chaos, Ethan said, kicking off his boots. Camilla removed her wet jacket, hung it carefully on the coat rack. Underneath, she wore a simple black t-shirt that was probably expensive but didn't advertise it. I like it. It feels alive. Something about the way she said it made Ethan's throat tight. Sit, he said, gesturing to the kitchen table. I'll get dinner started. While he cooked, and yes, it was just jarred sauce with some added garlic and oregano, nothing fancy, Maddie entertained Camilla with a detailed explanation of her rock collection, her bug collection, and her theory that caterpillars were baby dragons waiting to remember how to breathe fire. That's why they make cocoons, Maddie explained seriously, to practice their fire breath without burning down the forest. When they come out as butterflies, they've learned control. That's brilliant, Camilla said, and she sounded like she meant it. Most people say it's silly. Most people lack imagination. Maddie beamed like she'd been given a medal. Dinner was simple: spaghetti, garlic bread from the freezer, bagged salad that Ethan knew Maddie wouldn't touch. But sitting there at the worn kitchen table, listening to his daughter laugh and watching Camilla slowly, gradually relax, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not that anything would happen, not that this stranger would become anything more than a memory of one weird rainy evening. Just hope that maybe, possibly, he wasn't completely dead inside. That maybe there was still space in his carefully controlled life for unexpected things, for surprise, for the possibility that tomorrow might be different than yesterday. "This is really good," Camilla said, and she sounded surprised by her own sincerity. "It's spaghetti from a jar." "It's perfect." Ethan wanted to ask her what she meant, wanted to know where she'd come from, where she was going, why she looked at his cluttered little kitchen like it was a sanctuary. But he didn't. Some things he'd learned were better left as questions. After dinner, Maddie insisted on showing Camilla her room, an explosion of pink and purple and stuffed animals that Ethan had long since given up trying to organize. He did the dishes by hand, his ancient dishwasher having died 6 months ago, and listened to his daughter's muffled voice explaining the complex social hierarchy of her stuffed animal collection. When Camilla came back downstairs, Maddie, trailing behind her, there was something soft in her expression that hadn't been there before. "She's wonderful," Camilla said quietly. "She's a menace." Ethan dried his hands on a dish towel. "But yeah, she's pretty great." "Dad," Maddie yawned, rubbing her eyes. "I'm tired." "Bedtime was 20 minutes ago, kiddo." "But we have a guest." "The guest will still be here for exactly 5 more minutes while she gets ready to leave." Maddie looked at Camilla with sudden panic. "You're leaving?" "I have to," Camilla said gently. "But thank you for dinner, and the rock collection tour, and the dragon theory. I'll never look at butterflies the same way again." "Will you come back?" The question hung in the air, innocent and devastating. Camilla glanced at Ethan, something uncertain flickering across her face. He saw her weighing options, calculating risk, deciding how much truth to offer. "I don't know," she finally said, "but I'd like to." It was honest, at least. Maddie accepted this with the gravity of someone who understood that adults couldn't always keep promises. "Okay, but if you do come back, can you teach me about motorcycles?" "Deal." They shook on it, solemn as a business contract. After Maddie finally trudged upstairs to brush her teeth and change into her dinosaur pajamas, Ethan walked Camilla to the door. The rain had stopped, leaving everything wet and gleaming under the streetlights. "Thank you," Camilla said. "For dinner, for—" She trailed off, seemed to struggle with the words. "For seeing me." Ethan didn't fully understand what she meant, but he understood the feeling behind it. "Anytime." She pulled on her jacket, zipped it up. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you stop? When you saw me in the rain, you were closed. You could have just let me be someone else's problem." Ethan considered the question, thought about all the easy lies he could tell. Instead, he told the truth. "Because I know what it looks like when someone's drowning on dry land," he said quietly. "And I figured if someone had stopped for me when I was going under, maybe I should return the favor." Camilla's eyes glittered, and for a moment Ethan thought she might cry. But she just nodded, once, sharp and grateful. "Good night, Ethan." "Night, Camilla. Get that bike serviced." She laughed, small and real, and then she was walking down the sidewalk toward where she'd left the Harley parked outside his shop. Ethan watched until she turned the corner, swallowed by the wet Portland night. He closed the door, locked it, and stood in his quiet house. "Dad," Maddie called from upstairs, "can you do monster check?" "Be right there, baby." He climbed the stairs, did the ritual inspection of the closet and under the bed, kissed Maddie's forehead, and pulled her blankets up to her chin. "Did you like her?" Maddie asked sleepily. "Like who?" "Camilla." Did you like her? Ethan smoothed his daughter's hair back from her face. She seemed nice. She's sad like you're sad. I'm not... He stopped. Lying to Maddie had always been pointless. Yeah, kiddo, I think she might be. Maybe she needs friends. Maybe. You need friends too. I have friends. Name 3. Ethan opened his mouth, closed it again. I have you. I'm your daughter. That doesn't count. Maddie yawned again, her eyes drooping. You should be friends with Camilla. Then you'd both be less sad. It's not that simple, baby. Why not? Because I'm scared. Because everyone I've loved has left. Because I've built walls so high I've forgotten how to find the door. Because grown-up stuff is complicated. That's what grown-ups always say when they make things harder than they need to be. Maddie's eyes closed, her breathing evening out into sleep. Ethan sat there for a while, watching his daughter dream, and wondered when 6-year-olds had gotten so wise. He went to his own room eventually, lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and tried not to think about dark eyes and wet leather and the way Camilla had looked at his messy kitchen like it was a palace. Tried not to wonder if she'd actually come back. Tried not to hope that she would. But hope, he was learning, didn't care what you tried. It crept in anyway, stubborn and fragile, like the first flowers that push through Portland's rain-soaked soil every spring. Somewhere in the night, a motorcycle engine growled to life and faded into distance. Ethan closed his eyes, and for the first time in months, slept without dreaming of loss. The next morning dawned gray and soft, typical Portland spring weather that couldn't decide if it wanted to rain or just threatened to. Ethan got Maddie ready for school, breakfast, teeth brushing, the eternal battle over whether dinosaur socks matched her floral dress, and dropped her off with the usual chaos of the elementary school parking lot. Remember, Mrs. Patterson is picking you up today, he reminded her as she grabbed her backpack. I've got a transmission rebuild that's going to run late. Can Mrs. Patterson make good snacks? She makes excellent snacks. Better than your snacks? Significantly better. Good. Your snacks are sad. Maddie kissed his cheek and bolted toward her classroom, stopping only to wave dramatically, like she was boarding a ship to distant lands rather than walking into second grade. Ethan drove back to the shop, unlocked it, and tried to focus on work. He had Mrs. Chen's transmission to finish, a brake job on Mr. Harrison's pickup, and an oil change that should have been done last week, but he'd been swamped. Normal day. Normal work. Normal life. He made it until 10:30 before the door chimed and Camilla walked in. She looked different in daylight, less like a ghost, more like a real person. She wore jeans and a simple gray sweater, her dark hair pulled back, and she carried 2 coffee cups. Hi, she said, and there was something tentative in her voice that hadn't been there last night. Ethan straightened from Mrs. Chen's transmission, wiping his hands on his perpetual rag. Hi. I brought coffee. She held up the cups. I don't know if you drink it, or if you like it, or if this is weird, but I wanted to say thank you again for last night, and I figured... It's not weird, Ethan interrupted. And yeah, I drink coffee. Mainline it, actually. Relief crossed her face. She handed him one of the cups, black, no sugar, somehow exactly right. And they stood there in his garage, drinking coffee, not quite knowing what to say. So, Camilla finally ventured, I was thinking about what Maddie said about learning motorcycle maintenance. She was probably just being polite. She's 6. I don't think she knows how to be polite yet. Ethan snorted into his coffee. Fair point. I really would like to learn, Camilla continued. Basic stuff. How to check oil, change a tire, not strand myself in the rain like an idiot. You weren't an idiot. You just didn't know. Same thing. In my world. There was something behind those words, some standard she held herself to that was probably impossible and definitely unhealthy. Ethan recognized it because he held himself to the same kind of standard. Be perfect, be strong, never need help, never admit weakness. I could teach you, he heard himself say, if you're serious. I'm serious. It's not glamorous. You'll get dirty. Good. He studied her face, looking for signs that she was humoring him or playing some game he didn't understand. But she just looked back, steady and sincere, waiting for his answer. All right, Ethan said. When do you want to start? Now? He almost laughed. I've got work to do. I can wait, or help, or just watch. I don't care. She paused, seemed to hear her own desperation. Sorry, I have a lot of free time right now. Vacation? Something like that. The careful way she said it made Ethan curious, but he'd meant what he said about not needing to know people's stories. If she wanted to tell him, she would. If not, that was fine too. Okay, he said. Pull up a chair. I'll walk you through what I'm doing here, and then we can move to your bike. Camilla smiled, genuinely smiled, and grabbed the folding chair. For the next 3 hours, Ethan worked and talked, explaining the logic of transmissions and the poetry of engines while Camilla listened and asked questions that were smart and specific and betrayed a mind that knew how to learn. She didn't flinch from the grease or the grime, didn't complain when he handed her a wrench and told her to help him torque bolts, didn't check her phone even once, which struck Ethan as strange in the way that fish probably found water strange, so constant you stopped noticing it until it was gone. Around noon, they broke for lunch, sandwiches from the deli down the street, and sat on the curb outside his shop, eating and watching Portland do its Portland thing. Can I ask you something? Camilla said between bites. Depends on the question. Last night, when I asked why you stopped, you said you knew what it looked like when someone was drowning on dry land. Ethan's sandwich turned to cardboard in his mouth. Yeah, what did you mean? He could deflect, could make a joke, change the subject, protect himself the way he'd learned to protect himself. But something about sitting there in weak spring sunshine with this stranger who didn't feel like a stranger anymore made him want to be honest. My wife died 2 years ago, he said quietly. Cancer. Fast and mean. By the time they caught it, there wasn't much they could do except make her comfortable and wait. Camilla went very still. I'm sorry. Me too. Ethan stared at his sandwich. Afterward, everyone kept telling me I was so strong, that I was handling it so well, that Maddie was lucky to have me keeping it together. But you weren't keeping it together. Not even close. I was drowning. Every day, all day, barely keeping my head above water. But I couldn't let anyone see it because then they'd know I was failing and Maddie needed me to be okay, so He made a vague gesture with his free hand. I kept swimming, or pretended to. Same difference. It's not the same, Camilla said softly. No? Pretending to swim is exhausting. Actually, swimming means you're allowed to rest sometimes. Ethan looked at her, saw the weight she carried behind her carefully maintained composure. You sound like you know the difference? I do. She didn't elaborate, and he didn't push. They finished their sandwiches in companionable silence, and then Camilla helped him haul Mrs. Chen's transmission back into place and spent another hour learning how to properly adjust chain tension on her Harley. When she finally left that evening, promising to come back tomorrow, Ethan realized he'd smiled more in one day than he had in the previous month. That should have been his first warning. Should have told him that something was shifting, that the careful equilibrium he'd maintained for 2 years was starting to crack. But he was too busy feeling something other than numb to notice the danger. Camilla came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. By the end of the first week, Camilla had become part of the rhythm of Brooks Auto Repair in a way that felt both strange and inevitable. She arrived around 9, always with 2 coffees, and stayed until Ethan had to pick up Maddie from school. She learned to change oil, diagnose brake problems, and read the particular language of engine sounds that separated a minor issue from something catastrophic. She was a natural, which surprised Ethan less than it probably should have. There was a precision to the way she moved, a methodical intelligence that suggested she'd spent her life mastering complex systems. But she never talked about what those systems were, and Ethan had learned not to ask. On Thursday afternoon, while they were elbow-deep in a valve adjustment on a stubborn Honda Civic, Camilla's phone rang for the 15th time that day. She ignored it, same as she'd ignored the previous 14 calls. You can answer that, Ethan said, not looking up from the valve train. I won't be offended. It's not important. 15 calls says otherwise. Camilla's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. 16, actually. You missed one while you were in the bathroom. Someone really wants to talk to you. Someone always wants to talk to me. She said it with a weariness that spoke of years, not days. That's the problem. Ethan handed her a wrench. Hold this steady while I torqued the other side. She took it without comment, and they worked in silence until the job was done. The phone didn't ring again that afternoon, but Ethan noticed the way Camilla kept glancing at it, the way tension gathered in her shoulders every time the screen lit up with notifications she didn't read. That evening, after he'd picked up Maddie and brought her back to the shop for the last hour, something that had also become routine, Maddie doing homework at the office desk while Ethan finished up, Camilla surprised them both. "Can I buy you dinner?" she asked. "Both of you, to say thank you for the week." "You don't have to do that," Ethan started. "I want to." "We were going to do tacos," Maddie announced, looking up from her spelling words. "Dad makes really good tacos. Well, they're okay, but he tries really hard." "Maddie." "What? You do try hard? That's a compliment." Camilla laughed, and Ethan felt that same strange warmth in his chest that had been showing up more and more frequently. Dangerous, that warmth. He knew it was dangerous, but knowing something and doing something about it were different countries entirely. "Tacos sound perfect," Camilla said. "Can I contribute? Bring something?" "You can bring yourself," Ethan found himself saying. That's contribution enough. Something flickered across Camilla's face. Surprise, maybe, or gratitude, or some emotion he didn't have a name for. "What time?" 6. "You remember where—" "I remember." She did remember, showing up at 6:15 with a bakery box that turned out to contain the most elaborate chocolate cake Ethan had seen outside of a magazine. "I said you didn't have to bring anything," he protested. "I didn't. I brought cake. Completely different." "That's just semantics. Welcome to my world." Maddie was thrilled with the cake, less thrilled with having to eat actual dinner before they could attack it. But she managed 3 tacos, Ethan's attempt at authentic street style, complete with fresh cilantro and lime, and declared them better than last time, but still not as good as the truck on Alberta Street. "Brutal honesty," Camilla observed. "I like it. Dad says I should always tell the truth." "Your dad is right. But also, sometimes the truth hurts people's feelings," Maddie continued, working through the complex ethics of 6-year-old diplomacy. "So you have to be nice about it." "Well, how do you be nice about telling someone their tacos aren't great?" Maddie considered this seriously. "You say they're better than last time. That's true and nice." "She's got a point," Ethan admitted. They ate cake at the kitchen table, Maddie getting chocolate frosting on her nose and not caring, Camilla looking more relaxed than Ethan had ever seen her. The phone sat silent on the counter where she'd left it, face down, deliberately ignored. After Maddie went upstairs to play before bedtime, Ethan and Camilla cleaned up the kitchen in comfortable silence. He washed, she dried, and there was something deeply domestic about it that made Ethan's chest ache with an emotion he absolutely wasn't ready to examine. "Can I ask you something?" Camilla said, carefully placing a plate in the cabinet. "That seems to be your favorite question. Do you ever wonder what your life would be like if things had been different?" Ethan's hand stilled in the soapy water. "Different how?" "If your wife hadn't gotten sick. If you'd made different choices. If you'd ended up somewhere else, someone else." She paused. "If you'd be happier." "I don't think happiness works that way," Ethan said slowly. "It's not a destination you miss because you took a wrong turn. It's more like, I don't know, weather. It comes and goes. Some days it rains, some days it doesn't." That's very philosophical for a mechanic. Mechanics have a lot of time to think. It's a contemplative profession. He rinsed the last dish, pulled the plug, watched the water spiral down the drain. "But yeah, I wonder sometimes. Wonder if Sarah would still be alive if we'd stayed in Kansas. If the doctors there would have caught it earlier. If I'd pushed harder for more tests when she first said she was tired all the time." "You can't think like that." "I know. Doesn't stop me." Camilla was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I wonder if I'd be a different person if I'd made different choices when I was younger. If I'd be—" She trailed off, searching for words. "If I'd be more real. You feel pretty real to me. You don't know me." "I'm starting to." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Ethan saw something in her eyes that made him want to reach out, to touch her hand. to tell her that whatever she was running from could be outrun. But he didn't. He just stood there, dish towel in hand, 2 feet and 1,000 miles away from her. "I should go," Camilla said finally. "You say that every night." "Tonight I mean it." "You mean it every night?" She smiled despite herself. Fair point. But she did leave eventually, after Maddie had given her a hug goodnight and made her promise to come back tomorrow. Ethan walked her to the door, same as always, and watched her walk to where she'd started parking the Harley, right in front of his house, like she belonged there. "Camilla!" he called before she could swing her leg over the bike. She turned back. "Yeah? You are real. Whatever else you think you are or aren't, you're real. I just wanted you to know that." For a second he thought she might cry. Instead, she just nodded once, pulled on her helmet, and rode off into the Portland night. Upstairs, Maddie was waiting for Monster Check with the patience of someone who knew the routine was non-negotiable. "Do you like Camilla?" she asked as Ethan inspected under the bed. "We've established that she's nice, yes." "No, I mean, do you like her? Ethan's head hit the bed frame. "Ow! What?" "Sophie at school says when grown-ups spend a lot of time together, it means they like each other." "Sophie at school is 6. "So? 6-year-olds know stuff." Ethan emerged from under the bed, rubbing his head. "Camilla is my friend, like how you and Sophie are friends. I don't look at Sophie the way you look at Camilla." "How do I look at Camilla? Like she's sunshine and you've been cold for a really long time." Ethan sat down on the edge of Maddie's bed, completely derailed. "Where did you learn to talk like that?" "I read a lot." Maddie snuggled into her blankets, looking far too wise for someone who still needed help tying her shoes. "It's okay if you like her, Dad. Mom would want you to be happy. Baby." "She told me. Before she went to the hospital the last time, she said you were going to be sad for a while, but that someday you'd meet someone who made you smile again, and that was good. That was what she wanted." Ethan's throat closed completely. "She said that?" Huh? "And she said to tell you when I saw someone make you smile like she used to. And Camilla does. So I'm telling you." He couldn't speak, could barely breathe, just leaned down and kissed his daughter's forehead and held on maybe a little too tight. "Love you, Daddy," Maddie murmured, already drifting toward sleep. "Love you too, baby. So much." That night, lying in his own bed, Ethan let himself think about Camilla in a way he'd been carefully avoiding. Let himself acknowledge that she made him feel things he'd thought died with Sarah, that her laugh did something strange to his heartbeat, that he looked forward to 9 in the morning with an anticipation that had nothing to do with work and everything to do with 2 coffee cups and dark eyes that saw him clearly. It terrified him. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop being so afraid. The second week, something shifted. Not dramatically, not with any kind of announcement, but in the small ways that mattered. Camilla started showing up earlier, started staying later, started existing in Ethan's space like she'd always been there, like the universe had just been waiting for her to find her way to this particular Portland garage and this particular broken man who was slowly learning how to be whole again. On Monday, she brought lunch, real lunch, from a Thai place that Ethan had never tried because he was terminally practical about money, and they ate on the curb like they'd done that first day, watching the neighborhood happen around them. "Tell me about Maddie's mom," Camilla said, and it should have felt invasive, but somehow didn't. Ethan took a bite of pad thai, considered his words. She was light. That sounds stupid, but I don't know how else to describe it. She made everything feel possible, like the world was bigger and brighter just because she was in it. "How did you meet?" "College, University of Oregon. I was studying business, hating every second of it. She was in the library one night crying over an art history paper, and I sat down and asked if she wanted help. Did you know anything about art history? Not a damn thing, but I could proofread, and she could make me laugh. We stayed in that library until 3 in the morning, and by the time we left, I knew I was going to marry her." Camilla smiled softly. "That's beautiful." She was beautiful, inside and out, patient with me when I dropped out to open the garage. Never once made me feel like I'd failed by not finishing my degree. He gestured vaguely. She loved me exactly as I was. Grease and all. That's rare. Yeah, it took me a long time to realize how rare. Ethan set down his takeout container. What about you? Anyone waiting for you wherever you're supposedly not going? No. The word came out flat, final. There's no one. Really? Someone like you? Someone like me? Smart, funny, patient enough to learn transmissions from a grumpy mechanic. I'm not... Camilla stopped, seemed to reconsider. I was engaged once, 4 years ago. Called it off 3 weeks before the wedding. What happened? I realized he didn't actually know me. He loved the idea of me, successful, accomplished, the right kind of partner for his life. But if I told him who I really was, what I really wanted, she shook her head. He would have been disappointed, and I didn't want to spend my life disappointing someone. What do you really want? Camilla looked at him, and there was something achingly vulnerable in her expression. This, she said quietly, days that feel real, conversations that matter, people who see me instead of seeing what I can do for them. You've got that here. I know, that's why I keep coming back. They finished lunch in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before, heavier, loaded with things neither of them was quite ready to say out loud. Tuesday, Camilla brought Maddie a book about motorcycles through history. Maddie was thrilled, immediately demanding that Ethan read it at bedtime. All 67 pages, no skipping. Wednesday. Ethan taught Camilla how to rebuild a carburetor, and she picked it up so fast he started to suspect she had some kind of engineering background. When he mentioned it, she just smiled mysteriously and changed the subject. Thursday, it rained again. Really rained. The kind of torrential downpour that turned Portland streets into temporary rivers. And Camilla showed up soaked because she'd insisted on riding the Harley anyway. You're insane, Ethan said, handing her a towel. Maybe. She wrung water from her hair. But it felt good. Like I was proving something. What were you proving? That I'm not made of glass. That I won't break. Ethan wanted to tell her that breaking wasn't always bad. That sometimes you had to shatter completely before you could rebuild yourself into something stronger. But he just gave her dry clothes, one of his old flannels and a pair of sweatpants that were too short on her, and tried not to notice how right she looked wearing his things. They spent that rainy afternoon in the shop, not working on cars, but just talking. About everything. About nothing. About Ethan's childhood in Kansas and Camilla's childhood in a place she still wouldn't name. About dreams they'd had and dreams they'd abandoned. About what it meant to be happy versus what it meant to be content, and whether there was actually a difference. I think happiness is overrated, Camilla said at one point. Everyone's chasing it like it's the finish line. But what if it's not? What if contentment is the real goal? Just being okay with who you are and where you are, and not constantly reaching for something more. Sounds like you've been reaching for something more for a while. My whole life. She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Always the next achievement, the next milestone, the next thing that would finally make me enough. Except I'm never enough. There's always something more I could do, should do, need to do. Enough for who? Everyone. No one. Myself, I guess. Ethan leaned back against his workbench. You know what I've learned? The people who matter don't need you to be more than you are. And the people who need you to be more don't actually matter. That's very zen. That's very exhausted. Big difference. Camilla smiled, and for the first time since Ethan had met her, it reached all the way to her eyes. I'm glad I broke down outside your garage. Me too. The moment stretched between them, delicate and dangerous, and Ethan felt something fundamental shift. This wasn't just friendship, wasn't just two lonely people finding comfort in each other's company. This was something else entirely. Something that could either heal him or destroy him, and he wasn't sure which scared him more. Friday evening, Camilla stayed for dinner again. It was becoming a pattern, though neither of them acknowledged it directly. Ethan made chicken stir-fry. Maddie set the table with the kind of elaborate care that suggested she was planning something, and they ate like a family that hadn't been cobbled together from spare parts and accident. After dinner, Maddie disappeared upstairs to practice reading, which was code for avoiding bedtime by hiding under her covers with a flashlight. Ethan and Camilla moved to the back porch, a tiny deck that overlooked a postage stamp yard, and sat on the steps watching the evening settle in. Can I tell you something? Camilla said after a while. Always. I'm scared. Of what? This. You. What I'm feeling. She twisted her hands together. I haven't let myself care about anything real in so long. It's easier not to. Safer. But then I met you and Maddie, and suddenly everything feels dangerous again. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. Dangerous how? Dangerous like I could lose it. Like I could mess it up. Like I could let myself believe this is real and then have it taken away. She looked at him, eyes bright in the fading light. I'm not good at real, Ethan. I'm good at performance, at control, at being what people need me to be. But I don't know how to just be. You're doing a pretty good job right now. Am I? Yeah. He shifted closer, not touching, but almost. You're sitting on my porch, wearing my old flannel, telling me the truth. That's about as real as it gets. What if the truth isn't enough? What if it is? They sat in the question for a while, letting it settle between them like dust in still air. Somewhere down the street, someone was playing music, a gentle guitar melody that floated through the cooling evening. A dog barked. A car passed. Life continued, indifferent to the small revolution happening on this particular porch. Ethan, Camilla said quietly. Yeah? When I figure out how to tell you everything, and I will, I promise, please don't hate me. His stomach dropped. Why would I hate you? Because I haven't been completely honest about who I am, where I came from, why I'm really here. You're here because your bike broke down. That's how I got here. It's not why I stayed. Ethan wanted to push, to demand answers, to know exactly what she was hiding behind those careful words. But he'd learned that pushing never worked. People told you their secrets when they were ready, not when you demanded them. Okay, he said simply. Okay? I'm not going anywhere. Tell me when you're ready. Relief washed across her face so visibly it hurt to witness. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I might be terrible at receiving difficult truths. Somehow I doubt that. They sat until the mosquitoes drove them inside, until Maddie called down that she was ready for monster check, until the evening wound down into the familiar routine of bedtime and cleaning up and preparing for another day that would be just like this one, except maybe, possibly, a little bit different. At the door, Camilla lingered longer than usual. What if I'm falling for you? She whispered. Ethan's breath caught. What if I'm falling for you too? Then we're both in trouble. Yeah, he agreed. We really are. She left on the Harley, taillights disappearing into the dark, and Ethan stood in his doorway feeling like he'd just jumped off something very high without checking if there was water below. Upstairs, Maddie was still awake, waiting. Did you kiss her? She demanded the second he appeared. What? No. Why would... Sophie says when grown-ups like each other, they kiss. Sophie needs to mind her own business. Are you going to kiss her? I don't know, Maddie. It's complicated. Why? Because I'm terrified. Because I don't know if I remember how to love someone without losing them. Because opening your heart again after it's been shattered is the scariest thing in the world. Because I'm still figuring things out, he said instead. Maddie considered this with the gravity of someone deciding international policy. Okay, but if you do decide to kiss her, you should brush your teeth first, and maybe use mouthwash. Mrs. Patterson says fresh breath is important. I'll keep that in mind. Good. She snuggled into her blankets, satisfied with her contribution to his romantic life. I like her, Dad. I think Mom would like her too. Ethan's throat closed. Yeah, baby. I think she would. He did monster check, turned out the light, and went to his own room where he lay awake for hours thinking about dark eyes and dangerous feelings, and what it meant to let yourself fall when you'd forgotten how to land safely. The third week started with rain and ended with a phone call that changed everything. Monday through Wednesday passed in a blur of work and laughter and moments that felt stolen from someone else's life. Someone braver, someone who deserved good things, someone who hadn't already used up their quota of happiness. But Ethan was starting to believe that maybe happiness didn't work on a quota system. Maybe you got as much as you were willing to accept. Thursday afternoon, while Camilla was helping him diagnose a timing belt issue on a Toyota, her phone rang. and rang, and rang. She'd gotten better about ignoring it, but this time something was different. The screen lit up with a name, Patricia, in all caps like it was shouting. Camilla glanced at it and all the color drained from her face. "I have to take this," she said, voice tight. "Go ahead." She walked outside, phone pressed to her ear, and Ethan tried to focus on the timing belt. Tried not to eavesdrop. Failed completely when Camilla's voice rose, sharp and commanding in a way he'd never heard before. "I don't care what the board thinks." "No, I specifically said not to. Patricia, listen to me." A long pause. "That wasn't approved. Who authorized—" "Jesus Christ, stop. Just stop everything until I— No, I can't come back right now, because I'm in the middle of something important." Another pause, longer this time. "Tell them I'll be back when I'm ready." Her voice dropped, became almost pleading. "Please, Patricia, just give me a few more days, that's all I'm asking." Ethan couldn't hear the response, but he watched through the bay door as Camilla's shoulders slumped in defeat. "Fine. Tomorrow. I'll be there tomorrow." She ended the call, stood perfectly still for a moment, then pulled herself together with visible effort before walking back inside. "Everything okay?" Ethan asked, even though it obviously wasn't. "I have to go back." "Back where?" Camilla's laugh was bitter. "To reality, to my actual life, to all the things I've been pretending don't exist for the past 2 weeks." Ethan set down his wrench. "Camilla, what's going on?" "I can't." She pressed her hands to her face. "I promised I'd tell you everything, and I will, but not like this. Not when I'm angry and scared and everything's falling apart. Let me help." "You can't help with this." "Try me." She looked at him with something like desperation. "I have to leave tomorrow, early, but I'll come back. I swear I'll come back and explain everything." "How early?" "Before dawn. I need to be in Seattle by noon." Seattle. That was 4 hours away, longer on the Harley, which meant she'd been staying somewhere local, somewhere close enough to come here every day, but far enough to maintain the fiction that she was just passing through. "Okay," Ethan said, even though it wasn't okay, even though his chest felt tight with something that tasted like abandonment. "Will you at least tell me why you're going?" "Work, responsibilities, the life I left on pause." She stepped closer, close enough that he could see flecks of gold in her dark eyes. "But I meant what I said. I'm coming back. This isn't me leaving. This is just me dealing with something I've been avoiding." "Promise?" "I promise." She said goodbye to Maddie that evening with an intensity that made the little girl squirm. Made promises about coming back, about teaching her more about motorcycles, about next time and soon, and all the words people use when they're not sure if they're lying. At the door, she turned to Ethan one last time. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what?" "For not being brave enough to tell you the truth from the beginning." Then she was gone, and the house felt cavernously empty in a way it hadn't felt since those first awful months after Sarah died. Maddie cried herself to sleep that night, convinced that Camilla was never coming back. Ethan held her and made promises he wasn't sure he could keep, and felt like the world's biggest idiot for letting them both get attached to someone who'd been temporary from the start. But the worst part, the part that kept him awake long after Maddie's breathing had evened out into sleep, was that he believed her. He believed she'd come back. And that belief felt like the most dangerous thing of all. Friday came and went with no word from Camilla. Saturday stretched into Sunday, and still nothing. By Monday morning, Ethan had convinced himself that he'd been right all along. She wasn't coming back. Whatever emergency had pulled her away had reminded her of her real life, the one that didn't include a struggling mechanic and his too perceptive daughter in a rundown corner of Portland. He threw himself into work with the kind of manic focus that bordered on unhealthy, took on jobs he'd normally turn away, stayed at the shop until midnight, coming home only when exhaustion made his hands shake too badly to hold tools safely. Mrs. Patterson started picking Maddie up from school every day without being asked, shooting Ethan concerned looks that he pretended not to notice. Maddie stopped asking when Camilla was coming back. That hurt worse than if she'd kept asking. Tuesday afternoon, a week after Camilla had left, Ethan was replacing brake pads on a Honda when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him wipe his hands and swipe to accept. Brooks Auto Repair. Ethan. Camilla's voice hit him like a physical blow. I'm so sorry. He closed his eyes, leaned against the Honda's fender. Where are you? Still in Seattle. Everything's been more complicated than I thought. But I'm coming back tomorrow, I promise. You promised before. I know, and I meant it then too. Please, Ethan. I know you have every right to be angry, but just please trust me one more day. He wanted to say no, wanted to tell her that she'd already proven she was just like everyone else who'd promised to stay and then left anyway. But the exhaustion in her voice stopped him, the raw edge of something that sounded like desperation. One day, he said finally. Thank you. She paused. How's Maddie? Hurt, confused, convinced you're never coming back. I'm going to fix that. I'm going to fix all of it. I just need you to trust me a little longer. Camilla, what's going on? What's in Seattle that's so important you couldn't even call for a week? Everything. My whole life. But we'll talk tomorrow, I promise. Face to face. No more secrets. She hung up before he could respond, and Ethan stood in his garage holding a dead phone and wondering why he kept letting himself hope for things that never worked out. That evening, he tried to prepare Maddie for disappointment. Baby, Camilla called today. Maddie looked up from her dinner, eyes guarded. Is she coming back? She says she is. Tomorrow. She said that before. I know. Do you believe her? Ethan pushed food around his plate. I don't know. I want to. Me too. Maddie's voice was small, defeated in a way that 6-year-olds should never sound. But wanting something doesn't make it true. You taught me that. He had taught her that in the aftermath of Sarah's death, when Maddie kept asking if Mommy was coming home, and Ethan had to explain that wanting it with all your heart didn't change the reality. Now his own words were coming back to haunt him, delivered in his daughter's sad little voice. You're right, he said quietly. But sometimes people surprise us. Sometimes they do come back. And sometimes they don't. Yeah, baby, sometimes they don't. Wednesday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine, the kind of brilliant spring day that made Portland remember why people put up with 9 months of rain. Ethan opened the shop at his usual time, tried to focus on the transmission rebuild he'd been avoiding, and failed completely. 9 o'clock came and went. No Camilla, no coffee, no sound of a Harley engine. 10 o'clock. Still nothing. By 11, Ethan had accepted the truth. She wasn't coming. Whatever she'd been running from had caught up with her, and whatever she'd found here wasn't enough to make her fight to keep it. He was elbow deep in a particularly stubborn oil pan when he heard it. The distinctive growl of the Ironhead Sportster, louder than memory, more real than hope. He straightened slowly, not quite believing, and watched through the bay door as Camilla pulled up to the curb. She looked different. Still wore jeans and a simple shirt, but there was something about her posture, something about the way she moved that spoke of authority and control and a life he'd never seen. She pulled off her helmet, and even from across the street, Ethan could see that she'd been crying. She walked into the shop like she was walking to her own execution. Hi, she said. Hi. They stood there, an ocean of concrete floor between them, and Ethan didn't know whether to hug her or yell at her or just wait for her to explain why she'd broken his daughter's heart. I need to tell you something, Camilla said. Actually, I need to tell you several things, and you're going to be angry, and you have every right to be. But please, please just let me get through it before you decide you hate me. I don't hate you. You will. Something in her voice made Ethan's stomach drop. Camilla, what's going on? She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen a few times, then handed it to him. Read that. It was a news article from the Seattle Times dated 3 days ago. The headline read, Reyes Industries CEO returns after unexplained absence. Ethan skimmed the article, words jumping out at him like accusation. Camilla Reyes, Chief Executive Officer, billion-dollar tech conglomerate. Disappeared for 2 weeks without explanation. Board members in crisis. Stock prices fluctuating. Speculation about hostile takeovers and corporate sabotage and a dozen other things that made no sense in the context of the woman who'd spent the last 3 weeks learning how to change her own oil. He read it twice, then looked up at her. I don't understand. My name is Camila Reyes, she said, voice flat and controlled. I'm the CEO of Reyes Industries. We do software development, cloud infrastructure, some AI research. The company's worth about $3 billion depending on the market. I founded it 12 years ago when I was 26 with money I inherited from my grandmother. Ethan just stared at her. The day my bike broke down outside your shop, I'd been riding for 3 days straight. Not going anywhere specific, just going. Because I couldn't breathe anymore. Because I was standing in my office looking at my calendar, 18 meetings in one day, every minute scheduled, every decision life or death, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd done something just because I wanted to. The last time I'd felt anything real. She was pacing now, words spilling out faster. So I left, just walked out, told my assistant I needed a few days and turned off my phone and got on the Harley and drove. No plan, no destination, no idea what I was doing, and then the bike died. And there you were. And suddenly I had this chance to be someone else. Someone normal. Someone who could eat tacos and learn about engines and not have every conversation be about quarterly projections and market share. So you lied, Ethan said quietly. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you the truth. That's the same thing. I know. Camilla stopped pacing, faced him directly. I know, and I'm sorry. But Ethan, you have to understand, for the first time in over a decade, people looked at me and saw me. Not my company. Not my net worth. Not what I could do for them. Just me. And it was so intoxicating I couldn't give it up. So you let Maddie get attached to someone who was always going to leave. I never planned to leave, but you did. Because my company was imploding. Because my board was threatening a vote of no confidence. Because 300 people's jobs depend on me being there to make decisions. Her voice cracked. I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay here and keep pretending I was just a woman who liked motorcycles and fell for a mechanic who saw me when no one else did. The words hung in the air between them, confession and accusation all at once. You fell for me, Ethan repeated. Don't. Camilla wrapped her arms around herself. Don't make this about that. Not when you're about to tell me to leave and never come back. But is that what you think I'm going to do? It's what I would do, what any reasonable person would do. She laughed, bitter and broken. I'm a billionaire who lied about who I was and used you and your daughter as an escape from my real life. Why wouldn't you hate me? Ethan set down the phone, wiped his hands on his rag even though they were already clean. His mind was spinning, trying to reconcile the woman standing in front of him with the headlines about corporate empires and billion-dollar valuations. I need to understand something, he said slowly. When you were here, learning about cars, having dinner with us, was any of that real? All of it was real. Camilla's voice broke. That's the problem. It was the most real I've felt in years, maybe ever. Being here with you and Maddie, eating tacos and getting grease under my nails and feeling like a person instead of a position, that was the only honest thing in my life. But you were still lying. I was surviving. There's a difference. Not from where I'm standing. Camilla flinched like he'd struck her. You're right. I should go. She turned toward the door, and Ethan felt panic claw up his throat. Because yes, he was angry. Yes, he felt betrayed. But underneath all of that was the undeniable truth that he'd meant what he'd said to Maddie. Sometimes people surprised you. Sometimes they came back. Wait, he heard himself say. Camilla stopped but didn't turn around. Why did you come back? Ethan asked. If you're this important CEO with a company to run, why come back at all? You could have just stayed in Seattle. Let us think you were another person who left. Because I promised I would. She turned slowly. And because walking away without explaining felt like the coward's way out. You deserved the truth, even if it cost me everything. What does it cost you? You. Maddie. This. She gestured around the garage, the only place I've ever felt like I could breathe. Ethan wanted to stay angry, wanted to protect himself and his daughter from more hurt, but he kept thinking about the way Camilla had sat at his kitchen table, laughing at Maddie's stories with genuine delight. The way she'd listened when he talked about Sarah without trying to fix him or move him past his grief. The way she'd looked at his small, cluttered house like it was a palace. "Did you use us?" he asked. "Be honest, was this just some kind of rich person vacation from reality?" "No." The word came out fierce, definite. "I didn't use you. I found you. There's a difference." "Explain it to me." Camilla took a shaky breath. "Using you would have been pretending to care while knowing I'd leave the second it got inconvenient. Finding you means I kept coming back even when it would have been easier not to. Means I'm standing here right now knowing you might tell me to leave and never come back, but doing it anyway because you deserve to know who I really am." "And who are you really?" "I don't know anymore." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I thought I did. Thought I was this successful, driven person who'd built something important. But then I met you, and suddenly all that success felt hollow, like I'd been building a monument to my own loneliness and calling it achievement." Ethan leaned against his workbench, trying to process everything. "Your assistant, Patricia, she knew where you were?" "She figured it out. Tracked my phone before I turned it off completely, but she didn't tell anyone else. She just kept calling, trying to convince me to come back before everything fell apart." "And did it? Fall apart?" "Almost. The board tried to vote me out. Several major clients threatened to pull their contracts. Our stock dropped 12% in 4 days." Camilla laughed humorlessly. "Turns out, when you build a company that depends entirely on your presence, disappearing is really bad for business. But you fixed it." "Barely. I had to make a lot of promises. Work around the clock for the next 3 months. Prove I'm stable and committed and not going to disappear again." "So what are you doing here?" The question hung between them, simple and impossible. "I'm here because I had to see you," Camilla said. "Had to tell you the truth. Had to know if there was any chance that you could forgive me for being a coward who was too scared to be honest from the beginning." "I don't know if I can," Ethan admitted. "Not right now. Not when I'm still processing the fact that the woman who's been fixing transmissions in my garage is apparently one of the richest people in the Pacific Northwest." "I understand. But I don't hate you." Camilla's head snapped up. "You don't?" "I'm angry. I'm hurt. I feel like an idiot for not seeing through whatever this was." He pushed off the workbench, closed some of the distance between them. "But I don't hate you, because the woman I fell for, she was real. Even if she left out some pretty significant details about her tax bracket." "You fell for me?" Camilla's voice was barely audible. "Don't make this about that," Ethan echoed her earlier words. "Not when we still have to figure out what happens next." "What do you want to happen next?" "I don't know. I need time to think. To figure out if I can trust you again." He paused. "And I need to talk to Maddie, because you hurt her too, and she gets a say in this." "Can I see her? Talk to her?" "I don't think that's a good idea right now." Camilla nodded, tears finally spilling over. "I understand. Can you tell her I'm sorry? That I never meant to hurt her?" "I'll tell her." They stood in painful silence. All the easy comfort of the past 3 weeks evaporated into this awful, awkward distance. Ethan wanted to reach out, to close the space between them, to tell her it would all be okay. But he didn't know if it would be okay. Didn't know if they could come back from this kind of deception, no matter how well-intentioned it had been. "I should go," Camilla said finally. "Yeah." She walked toward the door, stopped with her hand on the frame. "For what it's worth, those 3 weeks were the happiest I've been in my entire adult life. That's not an exaggeration or a manipulation. That's just the truth." "Camilla, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know." She pulled on her helmet, and with her face half hidden, she looked like the stranger who'd stood in the rain 3 weeks ago, lost and alone and desperate for something she couldn't name. "Goodbye, Ethan." She walked out before he could figure out if he wanted to stop her. The Harley roared to life, and Ethan watched through the bay door as she rode away, possibly for the last time. His chest felt hollow, scraped clean of everything except a dull ache that reminded him uncomfortably of the months after Sarah died. He tried to work, made it about 20 minutes before he gave up, and called Mrs. Patterson to ask if Maddie could stay with her for a few extra hours. Then he locked up the shop, got in his truck, and drove to the one place that always helped him think clearly. The cemetery was quiet, the way it always was on weekday afternoons. He parked in the familiar spot, walked the familiar path, and sat down on the grass next to Sarah's headstone like he was settling in for a conversation with an old friend. "So," he said to the carved granite, "I met someone." The stone didn't respond, but he swore he could hear Sarah's voice in his head anyway, amused and knowing. "I wondered when you'd finally let yourself. She's complicated, rich, like really rich, billionaire rich, and she lied about it." Sarah's voice, warm with laughter. "And you're sitting here instead of figuring out what to do about it because I don't know what to do about it. Because I'm terrified. Because every time I let myself care about someone, they leave. And I don't think I can survive losing someone else I love." Love. The word surprised him, but as soon as he said it, he knew it was true. He'd fallen in love with Camilla somewhere between fixing her bike and teaching her about valve clearances and watching her eat tacos with his daughter. He'd fallen despite every wall he'd built, despite every promise he'd made to himself about staying safe. "So what are you going to do about it?" Sarah's voice asked. "I don't know." "Yes, you do. She lied to me. She was scared. You know what that feels like." Maddie got hurt. Maddie will heal. The question is whether you're going to let fear keep you from being happy. Ethan traced Sarah's name carved into stone, feeling the familiar grief settle around him like an old coat. But underneath the grief was something else, something that felt like permission. Like Sarah was telling him what she'd apparently told Maddie years ago. It was okay to move forward. It was okay to love someone new. It was okay to choose happiness even when happiness felt terrifying. "I miss you," he whispered. "I know. But I'm not coming back, and she might not either if you don't figure this out." He sat there for another hour, having a conversation with memory and stone and the part of himself that still carried Sarah's voice like a compass. By the time he left, he didn't have all the answers, but he had something better, a direction to walk in. Mrs. Patterson's house smelled like fresh cookies and fabric softener, and Maddie was sitting at the kitchen table working on a drawing with the intense focus she brought to all creative endeavors. "Hey, baby," Ethan said. She looked up, saw his face, and her expression shuddered. "Did she come back?" "She did." "Is she gone again?" "Yeah." Maddie returned to her drawing. "Told you." Ethan pulled out a chair, sat down beside her. She wanted to explain why she left. "I don't want to hear it." "I think you need to." "Why? So she can make more promises she won't keep?" "Because," Ethan said gently, "sometimes people do things that hurt us even when they don't mean to. And understanding why doesn't make it hurt less, but it helps us decide if we want to forgive them." Maddie was quiet for a long time, her crayon moving across paper in angry slashes of red and black. Finally, she said, "What did she say?" Ethan explained as simply as he could that Camilla had a very big, very important job that she'd needed a break from, that she'd been so tired and sad that she'd forgotten how to be herself. That meeting them had helped her remember, but then her job had needed her back and she'd had to go. "She didn't leave because of us," he finished. "She left because she had responsibilities she couldn't ignore. But she came back today to tell us the truth, even though she knew we might not forgive her." "What's her job?" Maddie asked. "She runs a company, a big one. She's in charge of a lot of people." "Is she rich?" "Very rich." Maddie processed this, her 6-year-old brain working through implications that Ethan could see forming behind her eyes. "So she doesn't need to learn about cars. She could just pay someone to fix them." "She could. But she wanted to learn anyway." "Why?" "Because she liked spending time with us. Because it made her happy." "But she still left." "Yeah, baby, she did." Maddie set down her crayon, looked at her drawing, a house with 3 people standing outside it, all holding hands. Or they had been holding hands. Now one of the figures was scribbled out in angry black lines. "I don't want to forgive her," Maddie said, voice small and hurt. "You don't have to. Not right now, anyway." "Do you forgive her?" Ethan thought about it, really thought about it. "I'm working on it, but I'm not there yet either." They sat in Mrs. Patterson's kitchen, father and daughter, both nursing wounds from the same source. Eventually, Maddie climbed into his lap the way she used to when she was smaller, and they stayed like that until Mrs. Patterson called them for dinner. That night, doing monster check, Maddie asked the question Ethan had been dreading. Is she coming back again? I don't know, baby. Do you want her to? I don't know that either. I think I want her to, Maddie admitted in a whisper. Even though I'm mad, even though she left, I still want her to come back. Me too, Ethan confessed. Me too. 3 days passed with no word from Camilla. Ethan worked, took care of Maddie, and tried not to check his phone every 5 minutes. Tried not to imagine Camilla back in her glass tower office, surrounded by important people making important decisions, forgetting all about a mechanic and his daughter in Portland. On Saturday afternoon, his phone rang. Not Camilla. Patricia, according to the caller ID. Hello? Mr. Brooks? The voice was professional, crisp, definitely not used to being questioned. My name is Patricia Huang. I'm Camilla Reyes's executive assistant. Do you have a moment to talk? I'm listening. Ms. Reyes wanted me to call you. She's not doing well. Ethan's stomach dropped. What do you mean? She came back from Portland and threw herself into work. 18-hour days, 7 days a week, barely sleeping. She's trying to prove to the board that she's committed, that her absence was an aberration. But Mr. Brooks, I've worked for Camilla for 8 years, and I've never seen her like this. She's killing herself trying to forget about you. Why are you telling me this? Because someone needs to. Because she's too proud to reach out again after you didn't respond to her explanation. Because I saw who she was when she came back from those 3 weeks, and she was happy, actually genuinely happy. And now she's miserable again, and it's killing me to watch. Ethan closed his eyes. What do you want me to do? I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. But I thought you should know that whatever happened between you two, it mattered to her. It matters to her, and she's grieving losing it almost as much as she grieved losing herself. Patricia hung up before Ethan could respond, leaving him standing in his garage holding a phone and trying to figure out what the hell he was supposed to do with that information. That evening, after Maddie was asleep, Ethan sat on his back porch and tried to make sense of everything. The woman he'd fallen for was real, even if she'd left out crucial details. The life she'd built here was real, even if it couldn't last. The feelings between them were real, even if they didn't know how to navigate the impossible distance between their worlds. And maybe that was the point. Maybe love wasn't about making sense. Maybe it was about choosing each other, despite all the very good reasons not to. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. He opened it to find a photo. Camilla in what looked like a conference room, surrounded by people in suits, looking exhausted and hollow and nothing like the woman who'd laughed at his kitchen table. The message below read, "She shows them this face, but at night, when she thinks no one's watching, she cries for what she lost. Thought you should know. Patricia." Ethan stared at the photo for a long time, and something inside him shifted, because he recognized that particular brand of grief, the kind that came from losing something before you'd fully let yourself have it, the kind that whispered you'd had your chance at happiness and ruined it and would never get another. He'd lived in that grief for 2 years after Sarah died. He knew its geography intimately, knew how it could swallow you whole if you let it, and he couldn't let Camilla drown in it, not when he had the power to throw her a line. He picked up his phone and started typing. The text sat in his drafts for 20 minutes while Ethan stared at it, second-guessing every word. Finally, he hit send before he could talk himself out of it. "We need to talk. Not over the phone. Can you come to Portland next weekend?" The response came faster than he expected, like she'd been waiting by her phone. "Yes. When?" "Saturday, noon, the shop. I'll be there." Ethan set down his phone and tried to ignore the way his heart was hammering against his ribs. He had a week to figure out what he wanted to say, how much he was willing to risk, whether he was brave enough to choose possibility over safety. 7 days felt like both too much time and not nearly enough. Monday morning, he sat Maddie down before school with a seriousness that made her squirm. "Remember how we talked about Camilla?" he began. "The one who left?" "Yeah. She might come back this weekend to talk." Maddie's face did something complicated. Hope and hurt and anger all wrestling for dominance. "Why?" "Because I asked her to." "Why did you do that?" Ethan took a breath. "Because sometimes people make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes hurt us. But if we never give people a chance to make it right, we end up alone and angry, and that's not a good way to live. But what if she hurts us again? She might, that's the risk. He smoothed Maddie's hair back from her face. But baby, here's what I've learned. Being safe doesn't mean you never get hurt. It just means you never get the chance to be really, truly happy. And I think maybe we deserve a chance at happy. Even if it's scary. Especially if it's scary. Maddie thought about this with the gravity of someone making life-altering decisions. Okay, but if she comes back, she has to promise, for real this time. I'll tell her. The week crawled by with the speed of continental drift. Ethan worked, took care of Maddie, and tried not to obsess over what he was going to say when Camilla walked through his door. He rehearsed conversations in his head at night, each one ending differently. Reconciliation, disaster, everything in between. Thursday evening, his phone rang. Camilla. Hi, she said, and her voice sounded rough, like she'd been crying or not sleeping or both. Hi. I just wanted to make sure you hadn't changed your mind about Saturday. I haven't. Okay, good. A pause. Ethan, I don't know what you want to say to me, but I need you to know that whatever it is, I'll listen, even if it's goodbye. It's not goodbye. Then what is it? You'll find out Saturday. He heard her breath catch. You're killing me with suspense here. Good. Consider it payback for the heart attack you gave me when I found out you were a billionaire. She laughed, small and broken. Fair enough. After they hung up, Ethan stood in his kitchen and realized he was smiling. Actually smiling, like some part of him had already decided which direction this was going, even if his brain hadn't caught up yet. Friday night, Maddie helped him clean the house with the intensity of someone preparing for a royal visit. Does everything have to be perfect? She asked, scrubbing the coffee table with more enthusiasm than skill. Nothing has to be perfect, but clean is nice. Are you nervous? Terrified. Me too. She paused in her scrubbing. Dad, what if we let her back in and she leaves again? Then we'll hurt, and we'll heal, and we'll be okay. Promise? Promise. Saturday morning arrived with characteristic Portland weather, drizzle and gray skies and the kind of damp cold that seeped into your bones. Ethan opened the shop at 9 even though he knew Camilla wouldn't arrive until noon. He needed something to do with his hands, needed to keep busy so he didn't spiral into panic about everything that could go wrong. At 11:30, Mrs. Patterson picked up Maddie for a special outing that involved ice cream and a movie and giving Ethan space to have a grown-up conversation. Maddie hugged him tight before she left, whispered, "Be brave," in his ear with the solemnity of someone sending a soldier off to war. At 11:57, the Harley pulled up outside the shop. Camilla looked different again, polished in a way she hadn't been during those 3 weeks, wearing dark jeans and a leather jacket that probably cost more than Ethan's truck. But when she pulled off her helmet, her eyes were the same, dark and uncertain, and achingly vulnerable. She walked into the shop like she was approaching a cliff edge. "Hi," she said. "Hi." They stood in the space where they'd first met, where her bike had died and his walls had started to crack, and neither of them seemed to know how to begin. "Thank you for coming," Ethan said finally. "Thank you for asking me to." Camilla twisted her helmet in her hands. "I wasn't sure you would, after everything. I almost didn't." "What changed your mind?" "Your assistant sent me a picture of you in a board meeting. You looked miserable." Camilla winced. Patricia overstepped. "Did she? Or did she do exactly what you needed someone to do?" "I don't know anymore. Everything's been..." She stopped, started again. "I've been working myself to death trying to forget about this place, trying to convince myself that those 3 weeks were just a fantasy and my real life is in Seattle making decisions about products I don't care about for people who only care about profit margins. But it's not working. I can't forget. I don't want to forget." Ethan moved closer, closing some of the distance between them. "I've been angry with you for over a week. Really angry. The kind of angry that kept me up at night going over everything you said, trying to figure out what was real and what was performance." "I understand. Let me finish." He held up a hand. "I was angry because you lied. But more than that, I was angry because you made me hope for something I thought I'd never have again. You made me believe that maybe I could be happy, that maybe there was space in my life for more than just surviving. And then you left, and it felt like confirmation of everything I'd been telling myself for 2 years, that I'd already had my chance at happiness and I didn't get another one. Camilla's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Ethan, but then I went and talked to Sarah. Well, talked to her grave, and I realized something. He stepped closer still, close enough to see the gold flecks in her dark eyes. I realized that I was more angry at myself than at you. Because you did what you had to do. You had responsibilities, people depending on you, a whole life that couldn't just stop existing because you wanted it to. But I was so scared of being hurt again that I didn't even try to understand. I just assumed the worst and pushed you away because pushing people away is safer than letting them close enough to hurt you. You had every right to be angry. Maybe. But anger's exhausting, and I'm tired of being angry. I'm tired of being scared. I'm tired of protecting myself so well that I can't let anyone in. He reached out, gently took the helmet from her shaking hand, set it aside. Here's what I want to know. When you were here, learning about engines and eating tacos and sitting on my porch, who was that person? That was me, Camilla said immediately. The real me. The person I am when I'm not performing. And the CEO in Seattle making billion-dollar decisions? That's also me. A different part of me, but still me. So the question is, can those two people exist in the same life? Camilla looked at him with something like desperation. I don't know. I've been trying to figure that out all week. How to be both. How to run a company and still have space to be human. How to honor my responsibilities without sacrificing my happiness. I don't have answers yet. Okay, then here's a different question. Ethan took her hands, felt them trembling in his. Do you want to figure it out? With me? Even though it's going to be complicated and messy and there's no guarantee it'll work? Yes, she breathed. I want that more than anything. Even though I'm a mechanic who lives in a tiny house and has grease permanently under his fingernails? Especially because of that? Even though I come with a 6-year-old daughter who will absolutely hold you accountable for every promise you make? I wouldn't have it any other way. Ethan felt something in his chest unclench, something that had been locked tight since the day Camilla had left. Then here's what I need from you. Complete honesty from now on. No more secrets, no more carefully curated versions of yourself. If this is going to work, I need to know all of you, the CEO and the woman who cries on motorcycles. Can you do that? Yes. And I need you to understand that I can't be your escape from reality. I can't be the place you run to when your real life gets hard. If we do this, we're building something together, not using each other as life rafts. I understand. And Maddie, his voice caught, you broke her heart when you left. If you're going to be in her life, you have to be all in. Not just when it's convenient. Not just when you can fit it into your schedule. All in or not at all. All in, Camilla said fiercely. I swear to you, Ethan, all in. They stood there, hands clasped, breathing the same air, and Ethan felt the last of his walls crumble. It was terrifying. It was liberating. It was the bravest thing he'd done since he'd decided to keep living after Sarah died. So where do we start? He asked. How about with the truth? Camilla took a shaky breath. The whole truth, everything I should have told you from the beginning. She told him everything. About inheriting money from her grandmother at 26 and using it to start a company that everyone said would fail. About working 90-hour weeks for years, sacrificing relationships and health and anything resembling a normal life. About reaching the top and realizing she'd climbed the wrong mountain. About looking around her corner office with its view of Seattle and feeling nothing but emptiness. She told him about the panic attacks that started 6 months ago, the therapy she'd tried and abandoned, the sleeping pills she'd started relying on. About the morning she'd walked out of her office and just kept walking, getting on her motorcycle without a plan or destination, just desperate to feel something real. I wasn't lying when I said the bike dying outside your shop was chance, she said. But staying, coming back every day, that was choice. The first real choice I'd made in years that wasn't about the company or the board or quarterly projections. It was just about wanting to be near someone who made me feel human. Ethan listened without interrupting, watching her face as years of pressure and loneliness and desperate striving poured out. When she finally finished, she looked wrung out, exhausted, but also lighter somehow, like confession had lifted weight she'd been carrying for too long. "Okay," he said simply. "Okay? I'm not going to pretend I understand what it's like to run a billion-dollar company. I don't. But I understand pressure. I understand feeling like you're drowning. I understand putting on a brave face while you're falling apart inside." He squeezed her hands. "And I understand that sometimes we do things we're not proud of when we're desperate to survive. I should have told you from the beginning. Probably, but I get why you didn't." "You do? You wanted to be seen as a person, not a bank account. I can't fault you for that." Camilla's tears finally spilled over. "How are you so understanding about this? You should be angry. You should be telling me to leave." "I was angry for days, but anger's not going to build anything worth having." He reached up, gently wiped tears from her cheeks. "Besides, I talked to Sarah about you." "You what?" "I visit her grave sometimes, talk things through when I'm confused, and I asked her what she thought I should do about you." He smiled softly. "She told me not to be an idiot, that I deserved to be happy, that running away from happiness because it might hurt was the coward's way out." "She sounds wise." "She was. Still is in my head." He paused. "She would have liked you, I think. Once she got over being annoyed that you lied about being a billionaire." Camilla laughed through her tears. "I would have liked her too." They stood there for a long moment, just holding each other's hands, breathing together. Then Ethan pulled her close, wrapped his arms around her, and felt her shake with sobs against his chest. "It's okay," he murmured into her hair. "You're okay. We're okay." "I was so scared," she whispered. "So scared that I'd ruined everything, that you'd never forgive me." "I'm scared too. Terrified, actually. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe alone." They stayed like that until Camilla's crying subsided, until her breathing evened out, until the worst of the storm had passed. When she finally pulled back, her face was blotchy and her eyes were red, and she'd never looked more beautiful to him. "So what now?" she asked. "Now we figure it out. Together." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "But first, you need to see Maddie." Camilla's face filled with apprehension. "Is she here?" "She's with Mrs. Patterson. I wanted to talk to you alone first, make sure we were okay before bringing her into it. But she knows you're coming, and she wants to see you even though she's scared to. I don't want to hurt her again." "Then don't. Show up. Keep showing up. That's all any of us can do." They took Ethan's truck to Mrs. Patterson's house, the Harley left behind at the shop like a promise of return. The drive was quiet, Camilla nervous in the passenger seat, Ethan's hand finding hers and holding on. Mrs. Patterson answered the door with a knowing look that suggested Patricia wasn't the only one who'd been meddling. "She's in the living room. Fair warning, she's been practicing her angry face." Maddie was sitting on the couch with her arms crossed, and she'd clearly been working on that angry face because it was pretty impressive for a 6-year-old. But the second Camilla walked into the room, the facade cracked. "Hi, Maddie," Camilla said softly, staying by the door like she was afraid to come closer. "You left," Maddie said. "You promised you'd come back and you left." "I know, and I'm so sorry. Dad says you have an important job." "I do, but that's not an excuse for hurting you. Are you going to leave again?" "I hope not, but I can't promise I'll never have to go to Seattle. My company is there. My work is there. But I can promise that if I go, I'll come back, always. And I'll tell you before I leave, not just disappear." Maddie considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "Sophie says promises don't mean anything if you break them." "Sophie's right. That's why I'm not going to break this one." "But you broke the last one." "I did. And I don't know how to make that right except to do better this time, to show you through my actions, not just my words." "How are you going to do that?" Camilla looked at Ethan, who nodded encouragement. She took a breath and crossed the room, crouching down so she was at Maddie's eye level. "I'm going to come to Portland every weekend," she said. "Friday night through Sunday evening, every single weekend for as long as you'll let me. I'm going to learn more about motorcycles with your dad. I'm going to eat tacos at your house. I'm going to do whatever you want to do, read books, collect rocks, talk about how caterpillars are really baby dragons. And when I have to go back to Seattle on Sunday nights, I'm going to call you every day so you know I'm still thinking about you. Every day? Every single day. Maddie studied Camilla's face with the intensity of someone searching for lies. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because her angry face finally melted. Can you teach me how to ride a motorcycle? Camilla laughed, surprised. When you're old enough, absolutely. I'm old enough now. She's definitely not old enough now, Ethan interjected. But someday, Maddie pressed. Someday, Camilla promised. When your dad says you're ready. Which will be never, Ethan muttered, but he was smiling. Maddie uncrossed her arms, slid off the couch, and walked over to Camilla. For a long moment, she just stared up at her. Then, without warning, she wrapped her arms around Camilla's neck and held on tight. I'm still a little mad at you, she whispered. That's fair, Camilla whispered back, her voice thick with tears. But I missed you. I missed you too, so much. They stayed like that for a long time, Ethan watching from across the room with a lump in his throat the size of Oregon. Mrs. Patterson appeared beside him with tissues because apparently everyone in the room needed to cry today. When Maddie finally let go, she looked between Camilla and Ethan with the calculating expression of someone planning world domination. So are you guys going to get married? Maddie, Ethan choked. What? Sophie's parents got married because they loved each other. Do you love each other? Camilla looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at Camilla. Neither of them seemed to know how to answer that question in front of a 6-year-old and Mrs. Patterson, who was watching with undisguised interest. We're still figuring things out, Ethan said carefully. But you might? Maybe. Someday. If we don't mess it up. You won't mess it up, Maddie said with the confidence of someone who'd apparently decided to take charge of the situation. I won't let you. They left Mrs. Patterson's house as an improbable unit, Ethan, Camilla, and Maddie walking to the truck together like they'd done it 100 times before. Maddie claimed the middle seat so she could hold both their hands, chattering about her week and her new rock collection, and how she'd told Sophie that sometimes grown-ups needed help figuring out their feelings. Back at the house, they made dinner together. Actual home-cooked dinner, not just tacos from a recipe Ethan knew by heart. Camilla proved surprisingly competent in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with the same precision she brought to engine repair. Maddie supervised and offered running commentary on everyone's technique. Over spaghetti, this time with sauce Camilla had insisted on making from scratch, they talked about logistics, how Camilla would structure her time between Seattle and Portland, how they'd navigate the complications of dating when one person ran a billion-dollar company and the other fixed cars in a garage that barely broke even. I've been thinking, Camilla said, twirling pasta on her fork, about ways to make this work. I can't abandon my company, but I can restructure how I lead it, delegate more, trust my executive team, work remotely when possible. That's a lot to change for someone you've known for 3 weeks, Ethan pointed out. 4 weeks now. And it's not just for you, it's for me. She set down her fork. I've been running that company like if I stopped moving for even a second, everything would collapse. But the truth is, it'll be stronger if I'm not the single point of failure. And I'll be better at my job if I'm not miserable and exhausted all the time. What does your board think about this? They don't get a vote. I still control the company. They can advise, but ultimately, I decide. She smiled. One of the benefits of being a billionaire, I can actually make choices about my own life without asking permission. Must be nice. You'd be surprised how rarely it feels that way. Usually it just feels like I have more people depending on me to make the right choices. After dinner, Maddie insisted on showing Camilla her room, which apparently had been reorganized in the week she'd been gone to include a designated motorcycle corner with the book Camilla had given her, and several drawings of Harleys that looked more like dragons, but demonstrated excellent enthusiasm if questionable accuracy. Ethan cleaned up the kitchen, listening to Maddie's voice and Camilla's laughter drifting down from upstairs, and felt something settle in his chest. Not quite peace. Too much was still uncertain for that. But hope. Solid, tangible hope that maybe they could actually build something real out of all this chaos. When Camilla came back downstairs after Maddie's bedtime, She found Ethan on the back porch, same as before, staring out at his small yard like it held answers. She forgave me faster than I deserved, Camilla said, sitting beside him on the steps. Kids are better at forgiveness than adults. They haven't learned to hold grudges yet. I'm grateful for that. She leaned against him and Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. Thank you for giving me another chance, for not doing the safe thing and pushing me away. You can thank me after we've figured out if this actually works. Pessimist. Realist. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the Portland evening settling around them. Then Camilla said, Maddie asked if we loved each other. She's subtle like a freight train. Are we going to answer that question? Ethan turned to look at her, really look at her, this complicated, brilliant, broken woman who'd crashed into his life on a dying motorcycle and somehow made him believe in second chances. Yeah, he said softly. I'm falling in love with you. Maybe already have fallen. I don't know exactly when it happened, but it did. Camilla's breath caught. Even knowing everything now? Knowing how complicated this is going to be? Especially knowing that. Because you're still here. You came back. You told me the truth even when it could have cost you everything. That's not nothing. I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered. Have been since the first time you asked me why I wanted to pay more for a simple repair. Since you saw me instead of seeing what I could offer you. So what do we do about it? This. She leaned in and kissed him, soft and careful and full of promise. It wasn't their first kiss. That honor would belong to whatever moment they both decided to be brave enough to try again. But it felt like a beginning, like the first page of a story they were going to write together, messy and imperfect and absolutely worth the risk. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Camilla rested her forehead against his. I'm terrified, she admitted. Good. Me too. Means we're doing something that matters. They stayed on the porch until the mosquitoes drove them inside, until the night grew late enough that Camilla had to make a choice about whether to ride back to wherever she'd been staying or accept Ethan's quiet offer of the guest room. She stayed. In the guest room, proper and appropriate and absolutely not what either of them wanted, but the right choice for people who were trying to build something lasting instead of just chasing the heat of the moment. In the morning, Ethan woke to the smell of coffee and found Camilla in his kitchen making pancakes while Maddie supervised from her perch on the counter. You can't put chocolate chips in pancakes, Maddie was saying. That's against the rules. Whose rules? Camilla asked. Dad's rules. He says chocolate is not a breakfast food. Your dad is tragically mistaken. Chocolate is always appropriate. I'm standing right here, Ethan said from the doorway. They both turned, smiled at him with matching expressions of mischief. And in that moment, Ethan could see it, the future they might build together. Mornings like this, small rebellions over chocolate chips, a home that felt full again. It wouldn't be easy. Camilla would still have to go back to Seattle, still have to navigate board meetings and corporate responsibilities and the weight of 300 people's livelihoods. They'd still have to figure out how to merge two completely different worlds into something that worked for both of them. But standing there in his kitchen, watching the woman he loved teach his daughter to make chocolate chip pancakes, Ethan thought maybe, just maybe, they had a fighting chance. And sometimes a fighting chance was all you needed. The chocolate chip pancakes became a Sunday morning tradition over the next 6 weeks. Camilla would arrive Friday evening, tired from the week but visibly lighter the moment she walked through the door. They'd have dinner together, the three of them, and slowly the sharp edges of transition would soften. By Saturday morning, she'd look like herself again. The version Ethan had fallen for, not the polished CEO who lived in glass towers. But it wasn't seamless. Nothing worth having ever was. The first real test came 3 weeks into their new arrangement. Camilla had to miss a weekend for an emergency board meeting that stretched into crisis management. She called every night like she'd promised, but Ethan could hear the exhaustion in her voice, could feel the distance that wasn't just physical. I hate this, she said on Sunday night, her voice thin and defeated. I hate that I'm not there. I hate that I'm breaking my promise to Maddie. You called her. You explained. She understands. Does she? Or is she just being brave because that's what kids do when adults let them down? Both, probably. Ethan shifted his phone to his other ear, settled deeper into his couch. But Camilla, this is going to happen. You have responsibilities. We knew that going in. Knowing it and living it are different things. Yeah, they really are. She was quiet for a long moment. What if I can't do this? What if I can't be both people, the CEO who runs a company and the woman who shows up for pancakes? Then we'll figure something else out. But you don't get to quit after 3 weeks because it's hard. That's not how this works. Since when are you the optimistic one? Since you showed me what it looks like to fight for something instead of just accepting defeat. He heard her breath hitch over the phone. Come back next weekend. We'll be here. We're not going anywhere. She did come back, looking hollowed out and running on too little sleep, and Maddie took one look at her and declared that they were having a rest day. No activities, no adventures, just movies and the couch and being together. By Sunday evening, some of the color had returned to Camilla's face. She's taking care of me, Camilla said to Ethan that night, wonder in her voice. Your 6-year-old daughter is taking care of me. She's good at that, gets it from her mom. I don't deserve her. None of us deserve the people who love us. We just have to be worthy of them. The second test came a month later when one of Ethan's regulars, old Mr. Harrison, whose truck he'd been keeping alive for 5 years, made a comment about that rich woman Ethan was dating. Nothing malicious, just curiosity tinged with the kind of judgment that came from assuming money and normal life couldn't mix. She seems nice enough, Mr. Harrison had said, but you gotta wonder what someone like that wants with a guy like you. No offense meant. Ethan had brushed it off in the moment, but it burrowed under his skin like a splinter. That night, after Maddie was asleep and Camilla was back in Seattle, he found himself staring at his reflection in the bathroom mirror and cataloging everything he wasn't. Not wealthy, not powerful, not successful by any conventional measure. Just a mechanic with grease under his fingernails and a mortgage he barely kept up with, and a daughter who deserved better than his best effort. What did someone like Camilla want with a guy like him? She must have heard something in his voice when she called that night because she cut straight through his deflection. What's wrong? Nothing. Ethan, what's wrong? He told her about Mr. Harrison's comment, hating how small it made him sound. Hating that he was letting an old man's casual observation shake the foundation of something he'd worked so hard to build. He's not wrong, Ethan said finally. We're from completely different worlds. Eventually, you're going to realize that. Realize what? That you could have anyone. Someone who fits into your life. Someone who knows how to navigate board meetings and corporate dinners and all the things I don't have a clue about. Camilla was quiet for so long that Ethan thought the call had dropped. Then she said, voice fierce and certain, do you know what I did today? I sat through 7 hours of meetings about market projections and competitive analysis and strategic initiatives. 7 hours of people talking about things that supposedly matter, and I couldn't make myself care about any of it. Do you know why? Why? Because all I could think about was getting back to Portland, to your cluttered little house, and Maddie's rock collection, and the way you explain engine mechanics like you're translating poetry. That's what I want, Ethan. Not someone who fits into my world. Someone who reminds me there's more to life than that world. But for how long? What happens when the novelty wears off? Then I guess you'll find out if I'm actually in love with you or just in love with the idea of you. Her voice softened. But Ethan, I've had the life everyone thinks they want. The penthouse, the private jet, the ability to buy anything I desire. And I was miserable. Completely devastatingly miserable. You know what made me happy? Learning to change oil in your garage. That's not novelty. That's the real thing. Ethan wanted to believe her, desperately wanted to believe that love could bridge the gap between their worlds. But doubt was a persistent companion, and it took up residence in the space between them like an unwanted house guest. The third test came in the form of a phone call that shattered everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon, unremarkable in every way until Patricia's number flashed across Ethan's screen and his stomach dropped before he even answered. Mr. Brooks? Patricia's voice was tight, controlled, terrifying. There's been an accident. The world narrowed to a pinpoint. What kind of accident? Maddie. She fell at school. They've taken her to Emmanuel Hospital. Patricia's voice cracked. She's in a coma. They don't know when she'll wake up. Ethan didn't remember dropping his wrench, didn't remember running to his truck or the drive to the hospital or anything except the raw animal panic of a parent whose child is hurt, and they can't fix it. The hospital was all fluorescent lights and antiseptic smell, and a young doctor with kind eyes who explained that Maddie had fallen from the monkey bars, hit her head wrong, and her brain was swelling. They'd done emergency surgery to relieve the pressure, but now all they could do was wait. Wait and see if she woke up. Wait and see if she was okay. Wait and hope and pray and try not to fall apart completely. Ethan sat beside Maddie's bed in the ICU, holding her small hand, and felt his world end for the second time in 3 years. She looked so small in the hospital bed, hooked up to machines that beeped and hummed and measured things he couldn't understand. Her face was bruised, her head wrapped in bandages, and she looked nothing like his fierce, brilliant daughter who'd been arguing about chocolate chip pancakes just days ago. He called Camilla with shaking hands. She answered on the first ring. "Maddie's hurt," he said, and his voice broke on her name. "She's in a coma. I can't, I'm coming." Camilla's voice was sharp, certain, all business. "I'm leaving right now. I'll be there in 3 hours." "You don't have to." "Ethan, I'm coming. Don't argue with me." She hung up, and Ethan sat in the awful silence of the ICU and tried to remember how to breathe. Mrs. Patterson arrived first, her face gray with shock. Then some of Ethan's regular customers, people whose cars he'd fixed, who knew him in that small-town way, even though Portland wasn't small. They brought food he couldn't eat, offered prayers he couldn't quite believe in, and sat with him in the waiting room so he wouldn't be alone. But he felt alone anyway. Alone in the particular way that parents of sick children are alone, trapped in a nightmare that no one else can fully enter. 2 hours and 47 minutes after his phone call, Camilla burst through the hospital doors, looking like she'd driven at dangerous speeds and hadn't stopped for anything. Her hair was wild, her face pale, and she was wearing the same clothes from her video call that morning. She found Ethan in the ICU waiting room and didn't say a word, just pulled him into her arms and held him while he finally broke down completely. "She has to be okay," he sobbed into her shoulder. "She has to be. I can't lose her too. I can't do this again." I know. Camilla held him tighter, and he realized she was crying too. "But you're not alone this time. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Over the next 72 hours, Camilla proved exactly how much those words meant. She didn't leave the hospital, didn't go back to Seattle, even when Patricia called with crisis after crisis that needed her attention. She sat beside Maddie's bed when Ethan needed to sleep, read stories out loud in case Maddie could hear, and held Ethan's hand through the darkest hours of waiting. On the second day, when Ethan was barely holding himself together, Camilla quietly took care of everything else. She paid the hospital bills that were already accumulating, didn't make a production of it, didn't wait for Ethan to ask, just handled it like it was the most natural thing in the world. She arranged for Ethan's shop to be covered, coordinated with Mrs. Patterson, and somehow made sure that everyone who wanted to visit could do so without overwhelming the ICU staff. "You don't have to do all this," Ethan said when he caught her on the phone negotiating with what sounded like a specialist. "Yes, I do," she said simply. "Because you can't, and someone needs to. Let me help Ethan. Let me be useful." The specialist arrived that evening, a pediatric neurologist from Seattle who Camilla had convinced to consult. She examined Maddie with gentle thoroughness, reviewed all the scans, and gave them the first real information they'd had since the accident. "The swelling is going down," she said. "That's good. Her brain activity is normal. But we can't predict when she'll wake up. Could be hours, could be days, could be longer. Every case is different." "But she will wake up?" Ethan asked, needing the reassurance even if it was false. "I believe so, yes. She's young, strong, and her injury, while serious, wasn't catastrophic. But Mr. Brooks," the doctor's kind eyes met his, "you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that when she wakes up, she might not be exactly the same. Brain injuries can cause changes, personality shifts, memory issues, developmental delays. We won't know until she wakes up." Ethan nodded because what else could he do? Camilla's hand found his and held on. That night, sitting beside Maddie's bed while she slept her terrible sleep, Camilla told Ethan about her own mother. She had a stroke when I was 19, she said quietly. Massive. By the time they got her to the hospital, half her brain was dead. She lived for 3 more weeks, but she never woke up. Never got to tell me she was proud of me. Never got to see what I built. I'm sorry. I sat beside her bed every day, just like this. Talked to her, read to her. Promised her I'd make something of myself, that her daughter wouldn't waste the opportunities she'd sacrificed for. And I kept that promise. Built my company. Made my first million, then my first 100 million, then my first billion. But none of it brought her back. She looked at Maddie, small and still in the hospital bed. When I got your call, I didn't think. I just moved. Because I learned the hard way that nothing matters more than being there when the people you love need you. Not money, not success, not reputation or responsibility, or any of the things I thought were so important. Your company will survive without me for a few days. And if it can't, then I've built something too fragile to last anyway. She squeezed his hand. I love you, Ethan. I love Maddie. And I'm not leaving until she wakes up. Until you both don't need me anymore. I'll always need you, Ethan whispered. Good. Because I'll always be here. On the 4th day, when Ethan was dozing in the chair beside Maddie's bed and Camilla was reading Harry Potter out loud because it was Maddie's current favorite, something changed. Maddie's fingers twitched. Camilla stopped reading mid-sentence, stared at Maddie's hand. Ethan, wake up. He jerked awake, followed her gaze. Maddie's eyes were moving beneath her eyelids, rapid and purposeful. Then slowly, they opened. Daddy? Her voice was small, confused, scraped raw. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. Ethan was at her side instantly, tears streaming down his face. You're okay. You're going to be okay. My head hurts. I know, you hit it pretty hard, but the doctors fixed you up. Maddie's eyes wandered, found Camilla standing at the foot of the bed. You came back. Camilla's face crumpled. Of course I came back. I promised I would, remember? You kept your promise. Always. I'll always keep my promises to you. Good. Maddie's eyes were drifting closed again, exhaustion pulling her back under. Because I love you. She was asleep again before either of them could respond. But it was different now. Regular sleep, not the terrible absence of coma. The monitors showed normal patterns. The nurses who rushed in at Ethan's call confirmed that this was good. This was progress. This was exactly what they'd been hoping for. Over the next 2 days, Maddie woke more frequently, stayed awake longer each time. The doctors ran tests and proclaimed her neurologically intact. No memory loss, no personality changes, just a concussion and some bruising that would heal with time. She'd need to stay in the hospital for another week, then take it easy for a month, but she would be fine. She would be fine. Ethan sat in the ICU and felt something fundamental shift inside him. He'd been given a second chance. Not just with Maddie, who'd come so close to slipping away, but with life itself. With the courage to choose happiness instead of just surviving. With the belief that love didn't mean inevitable loss, that sometimes you got to keep the people you loved. The day Maddie was moved out of the ICU and into a regular room, Camilla made a phone call. Ethan only heard her side of it, but it was enough. Patricia, I need you to start looking for someone to replace me as CEO. No, not immediately, but within the next year, because I'm restructuring my life and running a company day to day isn't part of that structure anymore. I'll transition to board chair, stay involved in major decisions, but I need someone else in the operational role. No, this isn't negotiable. Thank you. She hung up and found Ethan staring at her. What? She asked. You're stepping down? Eventually, not today, not this month, but yes. I'm starting the transition. She sat down beside him. I've spent 12 years building a company. It's time to let it stand on its own. Time to build a life instead. But it's your company, your life's work. No, it's my legacy. There's a difference. She took his hand. My life's work is figuring out how to be happy, how to be present, how to love someone fully without keeping one foot out the door. And I can't do that while running a billion-dollar company 70 hours a week. What will you do? I don't know yet. Maybe consulting, maybe investing, Maybe teaching people who want to start companies how to do it without sacrificing their humanity in the process. She smiled. Maybe learning more about transmissions. I hear there's an excellent teacher in Portland. Camilla, you don't have to do this for me. I'm not doing it for you, I'm doing it for me. You just happen to benefit. Maddie's voice floated from the hospital bed, slightly groggy, but unmistakably present. Are you guys fighting about being in love again? Because it's boring when grown-ups do that. They both turned to find her awake, watching them with the knowing expression of someone who'd spent too much time around adults who thought they were subtle. We're not fighting, Ethan said. Then what are you doing? Figuring things out, Camilla answered. Well, figure them out faster. I'm hungry and I want pancakes. The hospital doesn't serve pancakes for dinner, baby. Then someone should fix that. It's a design flaw. 3 weeks later, Maddie came home from the hospital with strict instructions to take it easy and a determination to do everything exactly as she'd done it before. Camilla had spent those weeks commuting between Portland and Seattle, setting up her transition plan, and slowly, carefully building a bridge between her two worlds that felt sturdy enough to stand on. The first weekend after Maddie came home, they had pancakes with chocolate chips because some traditions were too important to postpone. I've been thinking, Maddie said through a mouthful of pancake, about what happens next. What happens next is you heal and go back to school, Ethan said. No, I mean with us, with Camilla. She looked between them with that particular expression that meant she'd been planning something. Are you going to get married? Maddie, because I think you should. Then Camilla would live here all the time and we could have pancakes every weekend instead of just sometimes. Camilla and Ethan exchanged glances across the table. They hadn't talked about marriage. It felt too soon, too fast, too much pressure on something still finding its shape. But Maddie apparently had other ideas. That's a very big decision, Camilla said carefully. One that adults need time to think about. How much time? More than 3 months. That's forever. That's actually very short for these kinds of decisions. Maddie considered this with the gravity of someone who'd recently had a near-death experience and had strong opinions about wasting time. Okay, but you should think about it, because I asked Mom at her grave like Dad does, and I think she'd approve. Ethan's throat closed completely. You talked to Mom about this? Mrs. Patterson took me to the cemetery last week. I told Mom about Camilla and asked if it was okay if Dad loved someone new, and I felt like she said yes. Maddie stabbed another piece of pancake. So you should get married. That's what I think. After breakfast, after Maddie had been settled on the couch with strict instructions to rest and a stack of books to keep her occupied, Ethan and Camilla escaped to the back porch. The same porch where they'd sat so many times before, having conversations that shaped the trajectory of their lives. She's relentless, Ethan said. She's wonderful. That too. He took Camilla's hand, traced patterns on her palm. But she's not wrong about us needing to figure out what happens next. I thought we had figured it out. I'm transitioning out of the CEO role, moving to Portland in about 6 months. We're building a life together. But what does that life look like? Are we dating indefinitely? Do we eventually move in together? Get married? What's the plan? Camilla was quiet for a moment. I don't think I've ever made a plan for my personal life. Only my professional life. It's terrifying. Tell me about it. But if I'm being honest, she turned to face him fully. I want all of it. The moving in together, the marriage, the building a life that's ours. I want to wake up next to you every morning instead of just on weekends. I want to be Maddie's parent, not just the person who visits and brings presents. I want the whole complicated, messy, beautiful thing. Even though it's scary, especially because it's scary. The best things always are. Ethan felt his heart do something complicated in his chest. I want that too. But Camilla, I need you to be sure, really sure, because Maddie and we're a package deal, and she's already been hurt once. I can't let her get attached to you as a parent if there's any chance you'll change your mind and leave. I won't change my mind. How do you know? Because I spent 4 days watching her fight to come back to us, and all I could think was that I'd do anything, absolutely anything, to make sure she was okay. That's not the feeling of someone who's going to change their mind. That's the feeling of a parent. Something in Ethan's chest unknotted. So what do we do about it? We take the next step, whatever that is for us. They sat on that porch until the afternoon faded into evening, talking through possibilities and practicalities and dreams about Camilla renting an apartment in Portland initially, then eventually, if things kept going well, moving into Ethan's house or finding a new place together. About how she'd stay involved with her company, but in a board role that required travel only a few times a month. About how Ethan's shop was actually doing better than he'd admitted, and maybe it was time to expand, hire another mechanic, dream a little bigger. About marriage eventually, when they were both ready. Not next month or next year, but sometime, when it felt right, when Maddie had fully healed, when they'd proven to themselves that this wasn't just intensity born of crisis, but something real and lasting. 6 months later, Camilla moved to Portland permanently. She rented a small house 3 blocks from Ethan's, close enough to be present, far enough to maintain some independence while they figured out the rhythms of living in the same city. She stepped down as CEO of Reyes Industries with a press release that sent shockwaves through the business world, transitioned to board chair, and started consulting with startups who wanted to build companies without losing themselves in the process. Maddie healed completely, returned to school with a dramatic story about her accident that made her temporarily famous among second graders, and appointed herself the official overseer of Ethan and Camilla's relationship progress. Ethan expanded Brooks Auto Repair, hired a young mechanic fresh out of trade school who reminded him of himself 20 years ago, and slowly started to believe that success didn't have to mean struggling alone. The seasons changed. Summer brought long evenings on the porch and weekend trips to the coast. Fall brought rain and routine and the comfort of familiar patterns. Winter brought holidays spent together. Camilla's first Christmas with them marked by Maddie's insistence on including her in every tradition. And through it all, they built something neither of them had quite believed was possible. A life that felt real and whole and theirs. 18 months after Camilla's bike had died outside his shop, Ethan took her back to that spot. He'd closed the garage for the day, asked Mrs. Patterson to take Maddie on another special outing, and led Camilla into the shop where it had all started. "Why are we here?" she asked, looking around at the familiar space. "Because I needed to do this somewhere that mattered." Ethan's hands were shaking, but he pulled the small box from his pocket anyway. "Because this is where I met you. Where you crashed into my life and made me believe in second chances." Camilla's eyes went wide. "Ethan, let me finish before I lose my nerve." He opened the box, revealed a simple ring, not flashy, not enormous, just right for a woman who'd learned to value substance over show. "I'm not rich. I'm never going to be rich. I'm going to keep fixing cars and coming home with grease under my fingernails and probably embarrassing you at fancy events when you drag me to them. I don't care about any of that." "I know. That's why I'm asking." He took a breath. "Camilla Reyes, will you marry me? Will you let me keep falling in love with you every day for the rest of our lives? Will you be Maddie's mom and my partner and the person who reminds me that happiness isn't something you find, it's something you build?" Camilla was crying, but she was also smiling wider than he'd ever seen. "Yes. Yes to all of it. Yes." He slipped the ring on her finger and she pulled him into a kiss that tasted like tears and joy and all the second chances they'd both earned through choosing to be brave when it would have been easier to be safe. When they finally pulled apart, Maddie's voice echoed from the office. "Finally, Mrs. Patterson, you owe me $5. I told you he'd propose before summer." They turned to find Maddie and Mrs. Patterson standing in the doorway, both grinning like conspirators. "You knew?" Ethan asked his daughter. "Dad, everyone knew except Camilla. You bought the ring like 3 months ago and kept staring at it when you thought no one was watching." "I'm very subtle. You're very bad at secrets." Camilla laughed, pulled Maddie into a hug. "So you're okay with this? With me marrying your dad?" "I've been planning the wedding since you moved here," Maddie said seriously. "I have a whole notebook with drawings. You're going to get married in the garage where you met because that's romantic. And I'm going to be the flower girl because I'm excellent at throwing petals." "The garage?" Ethan repeated. "It's perfect. It's where your story started. Plus, Mom's picture can be there, so she's part of it too. I already checked with Mrs. Patterson, and she says it's very tasteful." Ethan looked at Camilla, who looked at Maddie, who looked back at both of them with the confidence of someone who'd appointed herself the family's director of important life events. "You know what?" Camilla said. "The garage is perfect." 4 months later, on a Saturday afternoon in early summer, they got married in Brooks Auto Repair. The shop had been transformed. Maddie's drawings hung on the walls alongside wildflowers that Mrs. Patterson and her garden club had arranged, and someone had managed to find enough folding chairs for the 30 people who'd been invited. The Harley sat in the corner, polished and gleaming, a monument to the accident that had saved them both. Sarah's picture sat on a small table next to it, her smile watching over everything, and Ethan felt her presence like a benediction. Like she was telling him what she'd told Maddie years ago, that this was right, that this was good, that love didn't replace love but added to it, making the world richer and fuller and more alive. Camilla walked down the makeshift aisle between the workbenches, not in a traditional wedding gown, but in a simple white dress that wouldn't have looked out of place in the garage on any other day. Maddie preceded her, taking her role as flower girl with the seriousness of someone performing surgery, carefully placing each petal exactly where it needed to go. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises to keep showing up, to keep choosing each other, to keep building this improbable life one day at a time. Ethan promised to always see her, even when she wore the mask of the powerful CEO. Camilla promised to always come home, even when the world tried to pull her away. And Maddie, who'd insisted on being part of the ceremony, stood between them and made her own promise. "I promise to remind you when you're being silly about grown-up stuff," she said solemnly, "and to make sure you have pancakes every weekend, and to love both of you forever and ever, even when you embarrass me in front of my friends." There wasn't a dry eye in the garage. The reception was held in Ethan's backyard, the one Camilla had first seen on that terrible night when she'd told him her truth. Neighbors brought food, someone rigged up speakers for music, and they danced on grass that desperately needed mowing, while the Portland sun made a rare appearance. Late in the evening, when Maddie was asleep on Mrs. Patterson's shoulder, and most of the guests had drifted home, Ethan and Camilla stood in their now shared backyard and looked up at stars that were just starting to appear. "So," Camilla said, "we did it. We really did. Any regrets?" "Not a single one." He pulled her closer. "You?" "Just that it took my bike dying to find you." "Maybe your bike knew what it was doing." "Maybe it did." They swayed gently to music that had stopped playing, held together by gravity and choice and the kind of love that survives crisis and builds something stronger in its wake. "Thank you," Camilla whispered. "For what?" "For stopping that night, for seeing me, for giving me a second chance when I didn't deserve it." "You deserved it. You always deserved it." Ethan kissed her forehead. "And thank you for coming back, for staying, for choosing this life when you could have had anything." "This is anything. This is everything." Maddie stirred in Mrs. Patterson's arms, mumbled something about dragons, then settled back into sleep. Their daughter, officially now, the adoption papers filed and approved a week before the wedding. Their family, small and imperfect and absolutely complete. Years later, when people asked them how they met, they'd tell the story of a rainy night and a dying motorcycle, and a man who stopped because he recognized loneliness in a stranger. They'd tell it together, finishing each other's sentences, and Maddie would roll her eyes and say she'd heard it a million times, but secretly, she never got tired of it. Because it was their origin story, their myth, their reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from moments of breakdown and vulnerability. That sometimes you have to get completely lost before you can find your way home. And home, they'd learned, wasn't a place or a tax bracket or any of the things the world tried to tell you mattered. Home was people who saw you clearly and loved you anyway. Home was pancakes on Sunday mornings and grease under your fingernails and falling asleep next to someone who chose you every single day. Home was here. Home was now. Home was them. The Harley still sat in the corner of Brooks Auto Repair, running smooth and perfect, ready for the occasional weekend ride when Camilla wanted to feel the wind and remember where she'd come from. But mostly it just sat there as a monument to the best breakdown she'd ever had. And in the house 3 blocks away, in the life they'd built from spare parts and second chances, Ethan and Camilla and Maddie lived not happily ever after because life was never that simple, but happily, messily, beautifully ever forward. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one promise kept at a time. Together,